So we'll call the meeting to order for November 18th.
Nat, your mic, is everybody's mic on? Just because we're,
They're working.
okay, good.
We are. I'll accept the motion to approve the agenda as written.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The minutes for September 16th. Does anyone have any questions, errors, omissions, additions? If not, I'll accept the motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Public comment, we'll take each item unless someone has anything specific. Go ahead.
Per item of the agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Items on the agenda, yes. Yep, this is a large agenda, a lot of different issues, so, just can you pull that over? Just, it doesn't matter, it's usually more towards the center, there we go.
Is that good?
Yep, perfect, thank you. Just the name for the record.
Okay, yes. Good evening. My name is Pauline Proch. I am one of 5 school committee members. And I just wanted to come this evening and just make a comment on the 2 meetings that the school committee have had previously regarding the roundabout at Surfside and Bartlett Road. And it is our thought as a school committee that we have concerns on the building of the roundabout, and it's really primarily based on the safety of our youngest children who are crossing that street, obviously during the school day, the morning and the afternoon, but it's a very busy intersection, as I know you're aware of. And we did have Mr. Burns come and do a great presentation for us, but after a lot of discussion, it was a unanimous vote that we did not support. And we realize it takes a lot of information, a lot of detail, a lot of discussion, but I just wanted to be on record for the school committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alan, are you okay?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So, Mike, let's, we'll move on to the action item A. Oh,
I think this lady wants
oh, I'm
to-
sorry. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll bum me. Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Zona Butler, one of 5 of the school committee members as well.
Yeah.
I just want to emphasize, I live in that neighborhood, so I knew about the traffic, and it concerns me for the roundabout. In the summertime, that is the busiest crosswalk for children going to the school, going to summer school, going to town, you name it, on their own, and there are a lot of small children. Roundabout means cars are in motion. Cars in motion tend to stay in motion. And I just would hate for something to happen there. I think the 3-way stop so far is doing fine, even though, there's a cluster of cars in the morning when school is in. That's fine, we're dealing with it. The fact that the crossing guard got hit before the 3-way stop was there is an item of concern for me. And I just can't help but think that a roundabout at that location at this time would not be in the community's best interest. So I please hope you take that under serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Anyone else have anything before we continue? Everyone gets to speak on whatever they want. I'm just saying, we'll just move to the next item. Mike, so so the first transportation thing would be the milestone safety project.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We wanted to include this item on the agenda at the request of at a previous meeting. And there's some information in the packet related to correspondence between the town and Mass DOT on this project. The letter, all the correspondence are in the packet for any of you to ask questions about or comment on. But essentially, the select board did review comments that were submitted by the Historical Commission and voted to request that DOT remove as much of the non-safety related signage as possible, and some other items. DOT did respond and essentially said that they're reviewing with the designer of record, GPI, which is they've done a lot of work on Island. They're reviewing the signage plan, and will be coordinating with the town on any of the recommended signage removals that they concur with.
Okay, and Mike, just for the record, for everyone's information, the number of signs includes what's already up, correct? Like what was up already? Like the number that gets thrown around, 80 more and all that, whatever it is. Is it including the signs that's already up or not?
No, it was definitely in addition to that. Did need to get proofread and verified.
Okay.
But there are a number of crosswalks that are going in at all the bus stop locations, and along with the dozen deer signs, there were other speed limit signs that it was just not roll marked with the speed limit from, especially exiting some ancillary roads like Tom Nevers or any of the neighborhood roads that are on either side of Milestone Road. There just weren't speed limit signs once entering the flow of Milestone Road that typically are provided. And speeding is an issue along the roadway, so that was something that came out of the road safety audit. Is since there were incidences of high speeds, that was a way to at least communicate what the speed limit was, especially reductions in speed limit as you get closer to the rotary. Those were all added to improve safety along those areas. Keep traffic around the 45 miles an hour instead of 65, especially with all the number of crosswalks that we're adding, and to help improve safety for pedestrians and anyone crossing the road.
Okay. Does anyone have anything? Judith? Sorry.
I just want to take this opportunity to ask if maybe we could review, particularly since there's some newer members here, what the process is. If, say this were proposed, tonight to start for 3 years from now, what are the benchmarks? Who decides? When do decisions get made? What consultation takes place? Do you see what I mean? I just think it would really be helpful to the community and to us too to fully understand that. And if that's okay, Nat, I think that would be helpful.
I actually think that's a good question, Mike.
Just what the process was for this? It was about a 2-year process to lead up to construction.
Not so much looking back at this, but because we've had enough postmortems already on this, I wanted kind of without referencing what happened in the past, I want to know if we started tonight, if there were a proposal that was trying to get this kind of funding from the state, could you explain the process, like step by step, about what happens, who decides, how that plays out, so we don't have to revisit. We asked the HDC, they didn't have an opinion. I am just trying to get a clear sense, both for us and for people watching, kind of how this works in general.
Sure. First of all, I would say that you do have to go back to this process because it was very right out of the book. It did adhere to the appropriate procedure. DOT did notify the town of an interest in starting safety improvement projects, and if that was starting today and we were reviewing a letter suggesting some safety improvements, we would do that, and then we would hold what's called a road safety audit, and that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, am I not to describe what we're supposed?
No, I just wanted to be sure I understood the starting point before you go too much further.
Okay.
So DOT comes to us with a letter, or do we have to ask DOT about something that triggers a letter? Do you see what I mean? I just want to know kind of step by step who does what and when.
Well, it could happen a number of different ways how you initiate a project.
thank you.
I would suggest for that particular project, we submitted a number of letters to DOT asking that safety improvements be done along Milestone Road. One of the safety improvements, of the key one, was changing centerline markings because there was a rash of crashes in the vicinity of Bunker Road and Milestone Road.
And when you say we, does that mean you? Does that mean plus? Does that mean this board? Does that mean the
This
select
board.
board? Okay. Do you see what I'm asking though? Is if you say
And
like
I'm
when
saying,
and who and
well,
what.
I can get very specific if you want me to get very specific. I'm speaking generally just to use thrift in explaining it. But this board reviewed a letter and concurred and sent that in. It was reviewed by Traffic Safety, the Traffic Safety Work Group, which is a committee of the police chief, fire chief, et cetera, DPW director. They all recognized that there was a concern with the crashes that were happening along Milestone Road, and we did submit at least 2 letters, which again were resent, asking that something be done because the crashes weren't They didn't stop happening. Every time there was a crash, we'd send off a copy of the letter again.
So I'm just doing active listening with you to be sure I understand. So the first thing would be, you might say there's a hazard here, you'd bring it to this board would say, pursue it with the Traffic Safety Committee? Is that?
Sure, and it's a number of different ways. Any planning effort that we go through, it could be an area planning process, it could be our long-range transportation plan. Any comments we get, somebody in this room right now can suggest, I think there's a problem at this particular intersection, and we would take it, look at it, and see if there was merit to advance the project or not. When I say that we were approached by the state, there was funding that became available, and we were asked, do you want to take advantage of this rural highway safety improvement funds? Because we did have so many requests sent in. So it's all, the generation is, the genesis of this is all public comment.
And at that point, it's a preliminary inquiry. It's not like a let's do this action because you haven't done the background work yet, right?
Some background work, but quite honestly, if you look at a small, Nat could tell you this, because he's very, very familiar with the request for Bunker Road on restriping the intersection. The effort is to look at a grander scope. Is there something bigger that can be done? Because there are other crashes on Milestone Road, and there were. And that takes a general review of the entire corridor to see if maybe not correct the center line markings at this one intersection, but maybe the other intersections need repainting as well, which they did. So that's just one way that can happen. But, you get the comments, the big funding becomes available. You do try to scope out the improvements. It's the next step, which is what I was trying to explain with the road safety audit. That gets to a very conceptual level, identifying problems and potential solutions. And in that road safety audit, all the signage that you see were itemized. There were deer strikes. So they recommended that, I believe the language in the road safety audit was strategically place deer advisory signs along the corridor. What was chosen as a good frequency was every mile there would be a deer warning sign. Another was the speed issue, and so speed limit signs were recommended. The other were the configurations of Tom Nevers Road and Monomoy Road weren't configured in the safest manner that they could be. So that's why they were teed up. And to shorten the crossings, provide some refuge area, and to slow the travel speeds for turning vehicles. So that was done. And then bus pull-offs were added. And then because there were no crosswalks along Milestone Road except for the one bike path crossing, additional crosswalks were provided at the bus stops.
Did you start like at the Rotary and work your way through? So like the turn to Pulpus Road, the turn by the cable TV? When you do one of these, is it for the whole road, or you're looking at where the cluster of safety?
Every project is different. Every project is different. The scoping of this project was quite easy because Milestone Road is its own state highway. So we just picked the limits of the state highway and used that as the project area to scope out the other improvements. So it was very simple to pick the project area. We just picked the entire state highway because the funds could be used on that. It was confined even further to keep all improvements within the state layout because it's different than the county layout. The county layout's much bigger and broader. So all the improvements were aimed at just doing improvements within the state layout.
When you say again, I'm trying to point this if somebody's out there watching, which they may not be, but they may want to come back this someday. When you say layout, is that the same as the right-of-way width?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, thank you.
I'm sorry to ask somebody.
No,
okay.
it's fine, because I want to sort of add to what Judith is saying in
Yeah.
my own sort of way of asking the same question in a slightly different way. Because I know we're moving on from this, Mike.
Okay.
The amount of reaction to today's standard, and don't take this personally, Derek, it's nothing to do with you, it's just how we think over here. When we did the roundabout at the post office, 2007, seems like 1907 compared to, it's been so long. The signs that got put up, remember that? The metal signs, everybody got mad, they got cut down right away. Now you see regular Nantucket signs from the sign person, and no one ever realized, no one even thinks about what it was like for a few weeks. That said, I just want to go back to the process. I know how it started with the accident, with the almost near accident with Miles' wife, and how I brought it to traffic safety.
Yeah.
This was like 3 years ago, but
Yeah.
not longer now. But Betta did
Beta.
Beta, okay, sorry. Beta did a lot of work for the loop, for the Tom, Nobody at Farm Loop.
Yeah, but don't go too far on a tangent because that was a whole separate project that they worked on.
No, I know that.
Okay.
I'm not going on a tangent, Mike.
Okay.
I'm just saying it, that the scope that we looked at with that kind of sort of worked, the work we're seeing now at Monomoy and it was part of that beta stuff, kind of part of it. Okay, and then I don't know what we're doing at Polkers because I don't know which one's been decided to take out the middle thing, right?
Yeah.
That was discussed with beta too. I think what Judith, to sort of add my sort of point to this is, how do we have to, if this started today, right now, we started talking about Milestone Road, having gone through what we just went through, my first question would be, how do we find the fine details? Because John spent one whole meeting fixing the Tom Nevers intersection to be what you see now versus what was the original idea. But we were focused on big stuff. When we were focused on things that were, large scale parts of the road. The little tiny things is what's got us in this pickle. The signage, which no one talked about. We never talked about deer signs. Nobody needs to know that there are deer in Nantucket. I think everybody knows that. And that kind of stuff is hard to answer. The curbing pieces with the, on those off roads and some of the small stuff we didn't really ever talk about because we just didn't get talked about. We were concerned with the big stuff. So my biggest thing is, we don't have two Sconset roads. There's probably never going to be anything like this again, in 10 more years. But to find those fine details, we really need to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about for people that aren't even sitting at this table.
Yeah, I didn't go into
what
the,
I mean?
I very, very briefly went over the process. We didn't want to talk about the history, but if you do want to talk about the history of the road safety audit, that was reviewed by traffic safety, and our comments were, and Jack is on traffic safety, he can concur with this. We did recommend against having the deer signs, but because there were so many deer strikes, we really didn't have a lot of argument to say don't provide them, because there were a lot of crashes that were attributed to deer strikes.
And that's a good answer, because that means we just take them out later. We go through another process. So in other words, if there are things that we can't fix at this level, when the process is sort of in its incubator, I think was what Judith is trying to say, starting it over again, if we had to do it, what would we do differently?
Yeah.
I can name 10 things we do differently now. I wouldn't have thought of any of them a year ago or 2 years ago.
Well, that's
You know what I'm
hindsight,
saying?
right? Yeah, no, hindsight
And
is,
that's all I mean. And I think also too, if this project was done 10 years ago when they did the paving, from 2009, and they did all this other stuff, I guarantee you it wouldn't look the same, because they weren't doing things the way they are now. It's getting more fancier with the pads and the different stuff that we've never seen here until the last, 6 or 7 years.
correct.
So that's all I'm saying. I think that might be partly what Judith is asking, because that's what I'm thinking. I don't know if anyone else feels the same way, but if we had to go back through this, anytime we have something like this again, we got to figure out how to get into the gory details of all these little, what does this mean on a plan? What does that mean? I've talked to Victor about this, okay? I'm being honest, everyone. I've talked to him for over an hour at least about this, and there's a lot of weird stuff that's the layman isn't going to figure out unless you understand what you're reading.
Sure.
So the road's going to get done. We're not going to be able to get rid of the things that we don't like today, but eventually it's going to become back to being Sconset Road again.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's how I feel now. I'm just saying we just got to figure out, Mike, together how to capture the stuff that's going to raise a flag, especially with social media. That's all.
I think we learned something with every project. I think when Poplis Road was built in, I don't know if Andrew would say this, but the details for 3-rail fencing probably would be a little bit paid attention to. The signs at Sparks Avenue roundabout probably would lean a little bit harder and say, listen, we really don't want these signs. People will not be pleasant when they see them. The deer signs probably should have dug in a little bit more and say, listen, this is not something that we really need in the every single project has one of these. You know, that's we have Shadbush that impacted the alignment of some projects and the timing of some of those projects. Shadbush is no longer an issue. So, you know, we're diligent of whether a plant's endangered or not. Every single project has these issues that you learn from, and they're Milestone Road, that's never done. It'll always be a work in progress because the pavement's going to deteriorate. It's going to be widened out probably in some near future. There's going to be a resurfacing of the project, you know, 20 years from now, where there'll be brand new signs put up. And I mean, it's a living part of the infrastructure. It's always going to need to be addressed. And the only thing you can do is just learn from what happened this last year and apply the lessons for the next decade or more.
Okay. Does anyone else
Could
have
I
anything?
just add, Mike, I would appreciate if it were possible to do this, some kind of a flow chart about what happens, and to really understand when is the decision point, and is the decision when it gets to the select board? Is it when the traffic safety group assembles, whatever? Because I don't think people understand that. I'm not sure I really understand that, because with all these different stops on the train,
Yeah.
you kind of build a momentum toward it. Is it when the funding is available, when you get 25% design?
No, I have a flow chart hanging in the push pin board in my office that
Well,
I'll
it
take down
might-
and send it around, because it does, there are a lot of decision points along the way.
Not just for us. I think it'd be great if that were on the planning department website, or that there was a little more information about that, because not everybody's here all the time. There's people that are here in the summer, not here in the winter. They won't necessarily know where your office is if they want to come in. I mean, it's just kind of, we're in an era where we're having to recreate civic education in a way that no complaint about anybody in any regard. It's just, these are complicated things. And especially when you've got state involvement, you've got contractor involvement, there's so many players, it's really hard for everybody to get a grip on where's the ultimate decision, who do they vote off the island if they don't like it? You know, when do you cross the point that you can't go back? And I just think people don't understand that. And if they don't understand that, they think government is not responsive to them, when in fact we in government need to keep pushing ourselves to try to be educators that way.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, 2 points to that. One, we probably should drop the attitude of we need to vote somebody off the island if we don't like something. I think that's part of the culture that's really been resonating here locally, that I really think it's sour and not healthy. It's toxic. The second point on that is that, you know, a lot of people really don't read up on this stuff until they need to. So we do provide a lot of these processes in our documents. They are there. They just need to be read, and usually they don't get read until somebody's, you know, stirred up. So that's really the sad reality. We can always do our best, and you know, there is a lot of room for improvement. There always will be on making it well understood what the process is. That'll never change, but we will always have to do that because people just don't know. They don't keep up with this stuff day to day. So we will always have to educate and share the flow charts and the procedures and outline it in our reports, so you all understand, and you can help us by communicating it out to the folks that you have contact with, and help educate them. That's the best that we can do. A lot of this, because quite honestly, this isn't exciting. It's something that people just don't have the urgency to understand it until they get emotional about it.
Well, part of it is it's also very technical, as you kind of indicated, and you're a trained engineer. A lot of people aren't trained engineers. I dig around. I'm a pretty good researcher. That's part of what I've done my whole life. So if I have difficulty finding documents, even if I'm prepared to sit down and read them, I can only imagine somebody who's not retired trying to figure out, you know, what's the name of the right document. So I think part of our role is to keep bringing the public face forward to say, is there a way to make it more accessible to people? So I appreciate your comments, and thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Right, and don't take this personally, any of this. This is just, like, we're in sort of like a flux now. You know, it's sort of calmed. It is what it is, I guess. But we got to learn from this. We can't forget about it and pretend it never happened. We have to figure out, like, if we put it, let's just, for example, say we put it around about a nobody a farm in Milestone someday, which I think is a great idea. that's gonna be, we gotta look, we can't just pretend that nothing happened with the previous project or whatever, you know what I'm saying? We have to
No.
look at this stuff a little bit more, in kind of a defensive way, making sure that we have that newness, but the historic newness kind of mixed together, so we're not just turning it into something else. At least they give us wooden signs.
Yeah.
Thank God for that, so
Yeah.
we can use them somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's what I keep saying.
No, and just so you know, Mr. Chairman, none of this, I don't think Andrew ever takes anything too personally. I don't think things too personally unless there's a code that's violated and everyone here that's taken an oath to adhere to a code that includes honesty and not personal attacks. I think that's when it becomes personal. I get frustrated, sure, but
And social
there's.
media, reading the stuff on social media, it must be, I get the stuff sent to me, and I just like.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just
Yes.
going to ask that we don't get into personal attacks, and I think that was at the edge, and I appreciate your sentiment, but I really don't think that's something we should be doing here.
I agree.
Mr. Chair?
Okay, yes, John.
Just on a lighter note, I was just reading through page 36. Over 100 years ago, we petitioned as a town for the 7-mile stretch to be a state highway. And in 1910, we were granted that. I don't want to bring up a big discussion, it's just, again, on a lighter note, but I'm just curious, if we petition the state, would we be able to retain or get the state highway repealed to be a local 7-mile stretch? And I find it very ironic when we have visitors come here. Everyone says, wow, you have a state highway? Why do you need a state highway? Speed limit is 45 miles an hour. It's really not as wide. We've taken this undertaking to widen the road, put pull-offs and curbs. But I'm just curious if that's a benefit aside from the money. Putting the money aside, we get a lot of the state funding, but we also, with that, come problems with 80 signs that we have to look at and try and reduce. So maybe a simple answer is think about the possibilities of repealing and taking this road back and putting it into our local possession and then really start fresh.
No,
But
it's a good question. We had a chance to do it about 8 years ago, I believe it was. It didn't even make it out of, I think we didn't get too far, but we did get that offer. I remember that. So, yes, Jack, sorry.
Several times the state has asked that question about giving it back to us. We never wanted it.
Yeah.
They pay us to plow it. They pay us to cut the grass. They pay us to do all this stuff. We're gonna have to pay all that ourselves. Do we want to do that?
Well,
Paying my tax for money.
it's a complicated answer. I don't want to give you my answer
Right.
to that, but I have one, but I'm not going to say it.
I wasn't advocating for
TV.
one or the other. I was just curious of
We gotta-
the possibilities.
Well, I would think, excuse me,
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
would think it's certainly possible to find out what happens if we decided to say, no, thank you. We're taking it back as town or municipal or county land, whichever would be the best
think
for
it
it
would
to
be
be. And then and see what would happen. I mean, does that mean we don't have state police anymore if we don't have a state highway? Well, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know
and
either,
do we-
actually.
and does that matter? I mean, what matters to us is keeping, one of the things in the letters that we, the town, sent, is keeping Nantucket. And the more we have to, it's very hard to get the powers that be to adapt to us, whether it's the feds or whether it's the state. We're seeing this, you see it, over and over. We all do in the areas we work in. So I think it would be worthwhile to look into that myself, but I don't know what.
And it
I don't know
doesn't
what
mean
other-
that we don't care about the state. It's just, like John just said, I could just turn around and say, well, what's the difference between Sconset Road and any other roads that we take care of? Really nothing, except one straighter. I mean, it's the same, it's not any different. It's just 7 miles of road added on to all
I'm
the
just
other
saying, why
roads.
not
Well,
just
I would say
find out
petition
what the facts
after
are?
we get all the work done.
After we get all
And it's
the
paid for.
Well,
Chairman?
okay,
Yeah.
I guess
I think the issue is gonna be it's $900,000 and
in the town, nobody wants to have their tax rate raised to plow Milestone Road or repair it or repave it. Plus, over the years, we've been, on years when we're not paving Milestone, we've been able to use that money to do Popus Road and other places. We've been able to divert that money to other projects. So I just think we just leave sleeping dogs lie, and as Nat alluded to, the signs that people object to in the Nantucket Way somehow disappear during the winter months, never to be seen again.
Well,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd be prepared to make a motion
Yeah.
that we ask staff to give us a report on what the consequences of such an action would be without assuming we would recommend it or not, but just to provide relevant information.
Andrew, before there's a second, because I would agree with that, but would this be a letter to Libby to ask that, or is this through Mike? I mean, I'm just asking because I don't know.
Well, it would be a research project that we would have to undertake right now. I don't know that, I mean, no offense, but I don't know that that's a burning priority right at this moment. I'd love, to do it at some point, but
How about if my motion be to be commenced within the next 6 months?
Okay. I mean,
And people may not want to do it. I just thought if
it'd
we
be
had the
nice to have an
discussion,
answer.
we'd.
I mean, we
yeah.
had it did get off at like 8 years ago. I think it was 8. It could be off a couple of years, but I just know that it happened. I mentioned it at the meeting a couple weeks ago.
Well, I'd like to second that,
yeah.
because I think getting the facts as opposed to what we suppose or don't know or do
Yeah.
know or what have you, it may just say, oh, my lord, keep it that way, or it may be,
Yeah.
maybe not. So I would personally like to have the facts, so I second
Yeah.
Judah's motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
So Bert
Jack and Bert.
opposed and Jack opposed. Chair votes aye. Ellen.
And
Oh,
Chairman,
yes.
if I,
Yeah.
so when you say research, are we talking about the dollars we spend, it would cost us a year to maintain?
Just different questions all mixed
So
in,
that's
yeah.
gonna be contained in the research?
Yeah,
Okay, great.
Like,
So,
it would be,
like the
would
process.
would it be a county layout like it was originally? I mean, there's a lot of questions. There's a whole bunch of questions that we wouldn't even think of right now, so. It goes all the way
it would
out.
go to the county. It
It would be a county, that's what I
it would
thought.
go to the county.
Yeah.
It's an existing county layout, which is larger than the state.
150. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
go to the county.
And thank you everyone for that. Sorry for the, emotion, but we always have our emotional moments at these meetings. Okay, Mike, okay, so we need to talk about, the next item. Am I skipping something?
No,
No.
Historical
The
Commission?
Historical Commission comment is about Bartlett, though, not about Milestone. We already did that before, right? Or are we going over that too? I don't know if I'm out of order or in order.
No, I think you're right. I think the next item on the agenda is
It's part of
the,
the Surfside question, right? Not the Milestone, correct? I believe it is.
I think so.
Yeah, stuff's in the packet from the previous thing, but it's not part of what we're looking at, I don't believe. Okay, so what page is that, 72? Just wanna make sure we're doing the right thing here. Yeah.
so Mr. Chairman, I can report on the, staff did submit material for potential funding through Mass DOT's Congestion Management Air Quality Improvement Program, CMAQ. Derek Schuster's on the phone. He can supplement any comments that I make with the zone. But the program, this project was recommended by the CMAQ Consultation Committee based on material that was submitted. There is material in the packet that describes that the project was unanimously approved with one abstention. And I did provide just some background comparing this project with other projects that were submitted to this funding program, just to show the air quality benefits of the roundabout improvement. You'll see that it's rated as far as all the projects that were submitted to DOT, and again, Derek can kind of supplement this. It had the most impact on reduction in CO2 emissions, which are greenhouse gas emissions, by a significant amount, almost double the reduction in CO2 emissions, and that's just by virtue of reducing the delays. We see with the stop control at the intersection what the backups are. Each time a car is delayed a certain amount of time, the engine's running, no movement. There is exhaust into the air. There may be some disagreement about what the exhaust does once it gets released into the air, whether it's actually having impacts on the climate or not, but we can still measure the exhaust and those particulates and agree that that's probably not the healthiest thing possible. So this improvement of close to 1 million units of CO2 does show that it is a significant project, not only for what I would argue is congestion and safety, but also environmentally with improvements to air quality.
Mike, so that's, if I'm reading this right, that's almost 1 million kilograms of CO2.
Correct.
And you're costing it at $3. Is that the project cost divided by the million?
Exactly. And there's a comparison of all the other projects that
I just wanted to make sure I understood.
So that's just an update on the committee that it was recommended for CMAQ. Just for informational purposes, we have had a lot of projects funded in the past using CMAQ funds. The Sparks Avenue roundabout had air quality improvements. The in-town bike path, the Goose Pond Railroad right-of-way path between Orange and Washington Street, that was funded with statewide discretionary CMAQ funds. Otherwise, there probably wouldn't have been budget available to construct that project. So we've been heavily dependent on statewide discretionary funds, and especially the state's CMAQ funding to help implement very pricey projects that otherwise wouldn't be able to be afforded through the TIP program.
Question.
Yes, Chris.
A couple of months ago, we talked about these projects, specifically the rotary projects, but most of the highway projects, when we were talking about the transportation improvement plan and an amendment I think we made to it. And within that, there were, we talked about the timing of any of these. And it certainly seemed to me, or my understanding was, that the timings of this particular project would be somewhere, was pretty far out because we didn't have a funding source. What does this do? What ramification does this funding have for how soon this rotary would be built?
I'd almost want to ask Derek that question because we are heavily dependent on the statewide discretionary fund to supplement the cost of this. This project is not programmed in the TIP right now. We're trying to get it programmed into the TIP.
So this isn't the funding for it. That maybe you need to explain what this particular funding is as the total.
I'll explain a little.
Thank you, Derek.
So CMAQ is the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality funding program. Any projects that want to be funded through this mechanism have to go through eligibility consultation, which is what Mike is reporting on at the moment. Now that it's been deemed eligible for CMAQ funding, if it's a project that that would be ready to program in the in the JTC's TIP in an outer year, that's something that with discussion with Highway Division we can program using CMAQ dollars now that it's been determined as eligible. So that's a good step. It means that a funding source has been identified, a federal funding source has been identified that you can take advantage of in order to program in your transportation improvement program down the road.
So,
Go ahead.
this particular funding would, it sounds like, would provide 100% of what we believe the cost of this program, this intersection would be?
Construction costs, not the design.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. And then is the second part, are you saying it's up to the town to decide when we would embark on this program, or is it going to be up to the state?
It has to be determined with the highway division if it's a project that, through reviewing the design status of it and the process with any project that you would go through, if it's something that you can program in your 5-year TIP and when. So we determine project readiness at the beginning of every year before making recommendations to the MPOs and JTC as to when we think they can be programmed, and we go from there. I don't know if Mike wants to comment a little more on how you've done projects in the past.
No.
In your TIP, but at the moment you don't have any projects programmed in your TIP, partly because your regional program target is not very large. It's based on a formula that deals somewhat with population, and Nantucket is not a very large population relative to other regions. But this project might be something that you could program depending on how the costs work out. I don't remember off the top of my head. Mike, do you know what the cost estimate was anticipated for this?
About 3.2 million, I believe. 3.5 million based on DOT's estimate. And I believe, just to help answer this, and Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, I think DOT would award that funding, or a significant amount of it, assuming that there was local support for the project, or else they would find another project to fund with that funding. We are demonstrating local support by virtue of our select board approving the conceptual design of the roundabout, this body approving the project and wanting it to advance through our regional transportation plan and in other documents. And we've had other committee supports through traffic safety, bicycle pedestrian advisory committee, a number of different other committees. We also have a school board that is giving you comments on the project. But I believe we've demonstrated significant public support through other means, not the least of which are other town meetings that have acquired real estate to make the project happen and appropriate design funding to at least get it up to a preliminary design, which is where the project is right now. And there will be scheduled public hearings on the preliminary design, I believe sometime soon, once DOT is ready to initiate those hearings, again, to further demonstrate local support. And if there's no local support at that point, there does come a point where a project isn't really desired anymore. I'm sure that happens. But we could have, still believe that some comments that are made in the preliminary design hearing are addressable. And that doesn't mean that the select board and this body and other bodies would still support the project. I think we would just need to address the concerns of those that don't support the project.
Okay, so nothing is happening until there is the DOT decides to go forward with it in some way. To fund it.
Yeah.
Then there would be a public hearing to talk about whether there's public support for it.
I'm not sure about the order of that, but yes. Well, we very well could be told very soon that prior to the preliminary hearing that we would be eligible to fund this with CMAQ funding, or afterwards. I'm not sure if Derek could tell you what his timeline is on selecting projects for CMAQ funding. It's just eligible at this point.
But just so we kind of have a general understanding, are we talking about 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years?
Right now, the eligibility was determined for an applicable year of programming for 2021. So federal fiscal year 2021 begins October 1st of 2020. So it was anticipated that the different order of operations for things before the project can be programmed would be complete by some time during federal fiscal year 2021. That's what the consideration was when this eligibility exercise happened. If the Highway Division, District 5, working with Nantucket determines that the project can be ready in that timeline, then there will be discussion as to whether you program that or can program that beginning in 2021 or not. So I'll leave that with Mike to coordinate with the district office to determine whether or not it's on track to be programmed in your TIP next year, or proposed to be programmed in your next TIP as a project that Nantucket will move forward with.
Okay.
Yeah, sufficient.
Yeah, I think Matt had.
Yeah, I look at it, I wonder, if we scaled it back to a mini roundabout, would it still be eligible for funding?
If the scope changes, it would probably have to go back to CMAC consultation, which meets 2 to 3 times a year.
Okay. So we'd have to go back. Because the other thing I thought is there's you say you could do 2 or 3 mini roundabouts instead of one big one, and you could make the school happy, because they're not happy with the big one, clearly. Is that something, would there be a process to do that? I'm just sort of thinking.
Sure. I think you'd have to ask the school committee if they would support a mini roundabout versus a modern roundabout. I know staff wouldn't support the mini roundabout because of certain thresholds, and I don't believe the designer of record has recommended advancing with a mini roundabout for certain the traffic volumes are beyond a certain threshold to make that function appropriately. It'd just be overburdening a smaller design with the traffic flows we experience throughout the year.
Is that what page is that? What's his recommendation?
I don't believe that material is in the packet.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
Talking about BHP, right, Matt?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just making sure yeah.
So just one more question, Mr. Chairman. So just so I understand it, so this would be something that we would be, this group would be considering when we talk about the tip for in the coming year, correct?
It would probably very likely be a discussion we have in, say, February when we initiate the TIP process, and the TIP would need to be.
It's not in there now, so we would have to put it in there.
No, we can't approve it right now because we don't have a funding source. And assuming if we still don't have a funding source in February, we still wouldn't include that project. If we're notified at some point that the funding source is available, we'd probably very likely need to amend the TIP, and we'd be talking at this meeting about whether we should amend the TIP to add the project or not. Right now, we wouldn't be able to program it.
Okay, just one final question. Yep. So then, in the end, who decides? If we voted not to include it in the TIP, would it go forward?
Not as a federally funded project. If you were able to identify another funding source for this project, you could theoretically make it happen. But as a project that leverages federal funds, if federal funds are identified, in this case CMAC funds, it would have to be programmed in your TIP.
So if it isn't in the TIP, this funding wouldn't be used.
Right.
You'd be voting not to accept those funds, correct?
Yeah.
Although the select board may say we support this project 1,000%, you would say we don't support the use of federal funds for this project. I believe I'm saying that correctly.
Okay. So that's really all the TIP deals with, is the question of the funding source.
Correct. Federal funds pass through this body.
Right. Through the TIP. Through the voting of the TIP.
That's the instrument we use, but you all make the vote on what's included in that instrument.
Okay.
And
Thank
Mike,
you.
just to add to Fritz's question, or series of questions, is the engineering costs can come from any local source, correct? It could be an override, it could be part of another article, or it could be free cash, it could be something.
So long as it's not TIP funds, correct?
So long as it's not TIP, right?
Correct.
I just want everyone to understand it, because that is something that gets sort of forgotten and gets brought to capital, or we don't, it doesn't mean the project is actually happening.
Yeah.
It just means that that's part of the process.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions?
I do.
Yep.
Matt, I was gonna ask the same question you did about the mini roundabouts, having read through the discussion and seeing the photographs and everything. And part of that discussion goes to something that you mentioned, where, on page 90, it says they were looking at the traffic volumes, and Beta did them in 2018, and GPI did them in 2010, and it says here that they still fall within the range that was found acceptable for a mini roundabout at this location, meaning the Bartlett, the one by the school, Barton Surfside. So I'm just, is that, are we, and you mentioned you didn't think that was true, I guess this would not be as effective. Is that right, Mike, or am I, because I'm just, there's something here that says, that could be as well, that could be used as well, and again, trying to figure out how to skin the cat differently if we, having 3 mini roundabouts that can bring down the emissions in the same fashion. I mean, is it, are we wedded to this? And I know I'm coming in very late in the process, but, we, sometimes you get stuck, you get started on a road and it's hard to go off that road once you've gone down it, even though it may seem maybe we should, look back or what have you. So I'm just, would this be possible to really analyze or deal with what they suggested there on page 90?
Sure. I think this is incomplete, which shown to you as information on page 90. I think what would be more information would be actually what is that threshold. I don't believe that's in here, and it's just so you know, it's average daily traffic at the intersection of 15,000 vehicles. Right. That's for a mini roundabout. Anything greater than 15,000, you start to see drop off in effectiveness, less efficiency, people trying to cut the turns or something like that. Whatever, the operation just doesn't work as efficiently because there's just too many vehicles trying to get processed. There's also an operational threshold for a modern roundabout. What we have right now as a preferred alternative, the average daily traffic that could handle is something in the neighborhood of 25,000 vehicles per day. So this difference between 15,000 and 25,000, that's the size difference between the two. Right now, the volume going through in 2010, the volume going through that intersection was in the neighborhood of 14,000. So it was below the 15,000 threshold. Today, it's right at 15,000 vehicles roughly. The design year we're designing for 2028, it would be greater than that, it's closer to 16,000 vehicles. So it would it's beyond what that threshold is. So again, I'm not a roundabout expert on the world. I'm kind of familiar with it to give you some of these numbers. The people who are familiar with this are the designers we hire to kind of look at this, and they do not support our mini roundabout at this location. It's right on the cusp of the capacity, and it doesn't anticipate growth nor some of the volumes that we experience in, say, July and August. It would just stop being effective at that point.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I guess there's my comment there, as I understand, we need to look forward. At the same time, I think it's critical that we do something about limiting the automobiles on this island and encouraging their use. So the more we plan for there to be another 10,000 vehicles, there's a little bit of, if we build it, they will come. And I'm not suggesting that we create traffic jams, but I am suggesting that planning simply, this isn't a throughput of, of sewage or something. This is a, this is allowing more pollution to happen if we, there's, cars don't just create pollution sitting at an intersection. So just have more cars on the island costs us lots of money all over the place in terms of maintenance and everything else. So I just want to put out there that, and I'm sure other people have said this, but since I'm new and I haven't said it before, I will, that I think we have to look forward, not only to make sure we have enough room for the cars we think may be coming, but also to look at how we can best manage our growth and not encourage more use of cars. Because if we could keep it at 15,000, then we wouldn't need to do this. And I'm not saying we have ways to do that, instantly, but I just think I don't I feel uncomfortable about planning to encourage more use of the automobile. And I know it's gonna happen, but
Yeah.
that's how I look at it.
Mr. Chairman, just something that was said there, we do actually have mechanisms that we can put into place to kind of curb auto dependency, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that's in our regional transportation plan. I know I need to sit down with you and talk about what our goals and objectives are and how we want to do that. The select board strategic goals actually try to get at that by reducing single occupancy vehicles being used on island by 6%. We're already very good on this in this community. We're better than any place else in the Commonwealth, but we could always get better. There's 3 ways you can generally do that and how we sculpt our transportation plan to do that. One is providing the infrastructure so you can walk and bike or take the bus as an option. If that's not in place, people aren't going to do it. So it's an endless battle. The other part is having a land use policy in place that does this. And Andrew can talk to you about how we have a town and country form of development and how our zoning districts are meant to have people live where they work and they play, all within proximity, so you can do that as an option. And the third is having a financial disincentive to actually driving, and that's where the parking management comes in and why the select board is trying to implement a parking management system so that it's a financial disincentive to drive, to park downtown, and that's going to help you achieve the goal that I think you're trying to describe right now.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, John, go ahead.
We're mentioning many roundabouts, and I just want to state, if you look at the models on 94, 96, and 98, although smaller, I think it brings some concern about the safety in this area for school children, because the minis look like they're much more dangerous. They don't provide a crossing space, a middle part where you can safely cross over the 1 lane and then continue. So if you look at page 83, what we're designing, I believe it is modeled after a small size 1 lane roundabout that is on 106 in Florida. And if I'm correct, that at least provides some safety for pedestrians to pass. I think the minis are just more open and they don't provide a safe harbor for pedestrians passing. So I don't think the smaller is better in this instance. I think either we're going to put one in or we're not, but if we put one in, I think we should stick with the plan of the 1 lane.
Does anyone else have anything? Andrew?
I mean, what John said is exactly really what, I mean, staff is not, we're not going to recommend something with paint that cars just simply ignore. That happens here all the time now.
Just a free-for-all.
Even our roundabout at Sparks, which has a different material, people routinely drive up on that. It's actually, for people I know that think that's kind of fun, to drive up over that and don't pay attention. I mean, think about coming out of the Pacific or the Bank of America driveway where you're not supposed to take a left. There's a sign there. There was a granite post there that stopped you from doing that. It lasted about 2 months before it was gone. You know what I'm talking about?
I turn left there all the time.
You're not supposed to.
Here's your violator.
Did we get that on tape?
It's not a CMAC, it's not a CMAC.
So people, having things that are painted or that, can just be driven over is something that we're not comfortable with at all. And again, if we're going to go to the trouble of doing this and then for it not to work or be more dangerous, we're just not going to be behind that.
I think just for a second here, I've been hashing this around since before the Red Sox won their second World Series in the 2000s. This is like, I think, and with people here from the school, it's really important that we include all this conversation, because then there's nobody ever here. We have more people here tonight than we ever do for meetings. So education of roundabouts, I do a lot of guessing in how the public thinks, and I was wrong about this. I thought that once we did the roundabout at the post office, that people liked them because they work, because they do work. If anyone that thinks they don't work, that's not even a question. As far as the safety aspect, that's a really good discussion to have, because that is a very difficult thing to put on paper as far as a consultant explaining that how vehicles are not trying to do 5 different things at the same time, when you're at a four-way stop and everybody's guessing of who's going when, flipping their arms back and forth, flicking lights, and all of a sudden there's somebody blasting through on a bike that you didn't even look at because you just didn't see it. But a roundabout, that doesn't happen. A roundabout, you're more focused and you can see better. It's like peripheral vision. However, I'm not going to get into that further than that conversation. I want to go back to what John said. I want to go back to what Maureen said. The Mini is, I've done a little bit of research in the last 24 hours on this. A Mini doesn't necessarily mean a painted little dot with some guy standing in the middle of it in the 40s. It's really could be a smaller, regular roundabout, modern. It doesn't have to be no grass, no raised sort of shoulder for the trailers to wheels to go over, because that's what that's for, and it works really well. I remember when we were designing that, and there was a lot of people against it on Hooper Farm Road. Now everybody takes Newtown Road for a shortcut to get to the roundabout. So I think that, Mike, somehow we have got to, and I don't know how to do this, we got to have an education process with video showing people crossing, bicycles mixed together. If you don't go to Europe all the time, you don't see them as much. There's a lot of roundabouts getting installed in the United States, and they're taking out four-way intersections and taking out traffic lights all over the place. You just Google it. It's unbelievable. There's videos. Colorado's taking them out all over and putting in roundabouts. So they're coming everywhere. You're just gonna see them one at a time when you take a trip. But as far as the school area goes, is a sort of a separate issue than the rest of the island. Okay, it's almost like we have half the island wants them and half of them don't. I think that got proven last year with fairgrounds and the Old South. 16 votes. We lost by 16. We won it at town meeting. I think that improving the Milestone Rotary, I wanted to talk about that with Derek on the phone, Mike, if that's okay to do, is going to be, whenever that happens, that's another issue. I don't know when that's going to happen. It's probably going to be at least 3 years or more, like everything else. That's going to be an education tool for the community as a whole. Once that is fixed and made into a real roundabout instead of a fake three-way stop and a yield, it's going to change people's minds in a sort of a way, because they're so used to the way it is now. They know it's a rotary that doesn't work, especially on the Spark side, because it's a stop sign and it's sort of an intersection, not a yield. It's going to make, I think that's going to help the community as a whole, but it's not going to help the community with the school area, because there's enough negativity with fear of anxiety, really, of this fear of kids being run over and all that, which I don't agree with, but that's me, because I don't believe that. I think that they're safer. So, but as far as this recommendation and what we have in front of us tonight, I agree with John, although I think that the circle could be, 10 feet smaller or something a little bit different, but I don't think it can be a painted dot with a bunch of striping. I mean, we could do that at 5 corners for a test and see what happens, because we already have it there. That's about the most old-fashioned intersection on the Nantucket. That's like Medford Square. Really, it reminds me of Medford Square when I was younger, going there, seeing the cop in the middle of the intersection. So, I'm just going to open it back up for more people to talk. I'm just saying I agree with this plan as far as what we need to look at. I think it could be adjusted a little bit. Right-of-way issues, some of the stuff on the Gibby Wire side of the road there, and some things like that. We definitely have to accommodate 65 footers, Mike, because that's what goes down there to Surf Hydrangea and Neal's and Bartlett's in the summertime. There's a lot of trucks that go to Bartlett's in the summer. So, and they're all usually over-the-road guys with bigger trucks and stuff like that. So that's not going to change. So we don't want them to go to the high school intersection. We want trucks to go this way. It's better, even though it's not good, it's better than the high school. So, does anyone else have anything to add to this conversation? Dave, I know you're just dying to talk about roundabouts, your second favorite topic.
Not going there, but I do think that it's important that we design it for tomorrow and not for today. And I don't think a mini will address tomorrow. It may address today, if we go down this path.
I think some of John's concerns, if you look at the bottom right, some of it is a design issue, like Matt's saying. It doesn't have to just be a dot painted in the road. It can be, a rumble strip in the middle. You can have shelters for people crossing, just not at the same scale. I think there's going to be areas where the scale of a traditional roundabout, regardless of whether we have 25 or 30,000 cars, it's just not going to be in keeping with the island. And so we may have to, say, okay, what's a better compromise? If we want some of this stuff to pass, I think we have to be inclusive and listen to the concerns of some of the people who have serious concerns. And I think the more we try to push it down people's throats, I think the harder it's gonna be, so. And I agree with Nat, when we do a real roundabout at Milestone, that's gonna help a little bit, but that's a number of years
It's
out.
almost it's sad because that's what came in 2005. Was it 4 or 5, Mike? I think it was 4.
I think it was 4, yeah.
Yeah, see, before the Red Sox, see that? So, oh my God. So we rejected it because everybody was angry because no one understood the difference. Like we were like in our sort of infancy on roundabouts. Nobody ever even heard of the difference between a roundabout and a rotary in 2004. And the state, I don't know if it was the state, but somebody came here. I can't remember what consultant it was, Mike.
We contracted with a consultant to do a feasibility. It was recommended in the Mid-Island area plan that we do an evaluation of the rotary because it was not functioning very well. We did that conceptual process and it really didn't go anywhere.
And one of the things I want people to understand, to sort of comment on what Matt just said, four-way stops don't work when there's 4 cars, let alone 4,000. It doesn't matter. They don't work when there's 1 car at each spot because still nobody's moving because everybody's guessing what the other person's going to do. That's just true. I mean, whatever. So as far as volume and more cars, okay, I mean, we could get into that as a whole meeting, but cars are in garages. They're already here. We're up to 1,500 less one-way car trips on the boat as of last month's numbers. It's pretty amazing. The cars are in garages on the island, close the door, and they come out in June. I don't know what to say. That's exactly what's happening on Nantucket. So I don't think we're going to be changing that trend. So, but with that said, the intersection backs up in the winter because of just people get out of work, get out of school. That's just how it is. It isn't really to accommodate more or accommodate the summer. It's year round in this area. So, we're going to have to go through the process. I just think we need to maybe try to mitigate some of the negativity with some slight adjustment, Mike. Maybe not a small roundabout, but something maybe 10 feet less or something a little bit better, but still provides the drainage plan, which I think is great. Mm-hmm. That's something that I think we should all know. In this plan, they have a plan to have all the infiltrators in the center for the street to take all the water and sort of not run it out. Because there's a big infiltrator system that has to come out that Jeff put in about 15 years ago. When you take a right onto Surfside, you see that big post? That's all infiltrators down there. That's why they put the post, because trailers, they thought they were going to crush them. Jack was involved, I'm sure at that time, remembers them doing that, because there was a big puddling going on there when it rained. So I think they've figured out what to do with the water, and they've used the circle as a sort of like a drainage under the street sort of thing. So, I mean, that's kind of a good idea, and I'd hate to see that just get blown up. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if there's a way to sort of, massage this thing a little bit, Mike, even if it's a small amount, I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
So, does anyone else have anything? Mickey, go ahead. Hold on one second. Does anyone else have anything before Mickey?
Yeah,
Brett,
just a quick thing. I hope we maintain if we do a Bartlett rotary,
curb protected safety zones or whatever they're called on the crosswalks. When you get halfway across the street, there's
Yeah, that was what,
Yeah.
who brought that up? You did,
The
John.
safety, yeah.
What do they call those?
Refuge islands.
Areas?
Yeah.
I knew, see that?
Refuge
I don't
areas,
remember
excuse
that.
me.
But we put them in
Refuge.
on the Milestone Rotary a few
Yeah.
years ago, cutting through the bushes there. There was high curbs,
Place
so
for people to
cars
stand in
can't
the
get
middle.
in there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they call for it.
Yeah.
okay. Mickey?
Yeah, I'm Mickey Rowland for the Nantucket Historical Commission. And you've already kind of discussed this evening already, but our position is that if you're going to do a roundabout, and we're not advocating for a roundabout versus a stop sign, but if you're going to do one sort of to keep it in the historical context of Nantucket and the scale of what we're used to seeing in the island, that the mini, smaller is better, not necessarily a mini, but a mini could conceivably work. But you've already mentioned just scaling down the current design. I think that's probably the direction we'd like to see going.
Thank you,
Thank
Mickey,
you.
very much for your time as well. So does anyone else have anything before we, Mike, what do you need from us right now? I know that we're supposed to, send a recommendation, or are we continuing this to the next meeting?
The CMAC material was simply for informational, so you're aware of the benefits
so
of the
we don't
project
have
for
to
the air
make a
quality, and the
formal vote or
other
anything for that.
conversation was to review the historical commission comments that are included in the packet, which I think you just did.
Okay. So before we close out this, before the school people leave, I don't want them to just get up and leave and say bye. I want to try to, is there any, I've talked to some of you guys, not you two, but I've been talking to other members, and it isn't like I've never talked about roundabouts before. I think there's a little warming to it a little bit in the last year compared to previous years. You have to remember, we started with the high school, I call it the high school one, the Prospect, right? That was the first roundabout proposal. It was before the post office plan, because the post office caused it to have to happen because of the changes in the exiting and so forth. So there was a lot of negativity then, as far as everybody's worried about the tree, and that's all out of that plan. It never was really part of it. The cut through versus the realignment. The hospital was going to wasn't even talking about doing anything at that time. This was so long ago that none of those things were going on. So my point is there any education to roundabouts in general for safety, flow, how cars slow down? They're not speeding up. They're slowing down. They're just not slamming on their brakes, stepping on the gas and slamming on the brakes, looking to the right, looking to the left, back and forth. That's what a roundabout changes. It kind of creates people to slow down and pay attention, put their phones down. Rob McNeil says that all the time, and he's right. It does. It actually does do that. So I guess what I'm saying is the school committee open to a roundabout education, some kind of forum with a professional like the guy from Beta that came here a couple of years ago that I thought was the best one so far we've ever had talk about it? Because there's an edge. It's how do you explain it? The videos showing all this stuff. I mean, I don't know where this money would come from. We'd have to do something for that to happen. But I want the school committee to not be against something that actually is a good thing somehow. I mean, we would have voted against.
Derek on the phone.
Yes, Derek.
I just wanted to chime in real quickly. The Federal Highway Administration's safety division has guidance online as well as videos about roundabouts and mini roundabouts. So if you're looking for information to disseminate or videos for certain bodies to watch, they have a lot of information. It's easily Googleable. FHWA roundabouts, and you'll see a lot of guidance from the federal government on them to better educate people. Just wanted to make sure.
No, Derek, thank you for that. That's probably some of the stuff I was looking at with Colorado, but I appreciate you saying that. So I'm just, we can't talk about this much longer because everyone's going to get mad at me. But I just care about how you guys feel. I just don't want it to be us versus us. That's all. Okay? Is that good? Okay, you can talk. Sure. Yep.
I certainly, Pauline Proch, School Committee. I certainly am not able to speak for the entire board of the school committee. I grew up in Great Britain. I live in Europe for many years. I'm very familiar with roundabouts, and I support the concept of roundabouts, and I do believe that the roundabouts we have on the island currently work. They're effective. I also supported the roundabout as a trial at the end of Fairgrounds Road.
Okay.
That's not the issue. I'm visioning a 7-year-old walking up the right-hand side of that pavement, and I'm looking at, if we look at that particular screen, looking at the car on the right-hand side, being that driver, where is his sight line? His sight line is going to be on the red car or the black car that's immediately in front of him, but you're trained when you go through driver's ed to look and give way to the traffic, oncoming traffic. It's not your immediate thought, and in fact, in that diagram, there isn't even a crosswalk on that right-hand side, but clearly you could do it as you have in the other two openings. But I'm concerned about the 7-year-old who is going to walk up on the pavement and cross over because they see that their way over to the school is crossing over those two roads. And that black car is not going to be looking to their right. They're going to be looking to their left because they are going to be approaching, and that's what you're taught in your driver's ed. You yield to your oncoming traffic. That's my biggest concern. With the 4 photographs that you had earlier up there, the bottom left, again, similar concern that a driver is coming up and they're looking to the left, not to the right, where children would be potentially coming to cross on that side of the road. We did have Mike come to school committee, and he did a very thorough presentation. We're 5 independent thinkers. I think we all have different experiences. I don't know the history, whether my co-committee supports the other roundabouts on the island, but I think after a great discussion in 2 different meetings, we all came away with the same concern. We have 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds walking to school. Whether we agree that that's a safety matter or not, that's the reality. And I don't think that developmentally their decision-making skills are well developed to negotiate something like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline, for your time.
Could I ask a follow-up? I've wondered whether there'd be a way to have a pedestrian bridge, something to avoid the crossing at grade, but to go up and over. I know we have some trucks that are large, but is that something you could imagine happening?
Have to be cottage red or white?
But in terms of safety considerations.
In terms of safety, in my opinion, of course. Because it takes out that element of that metal car, running over a 7-year-old.
Well, and likewise, bicyclists and older people, and if you design it right, you'd have to be sure that there's accessibility and it wasn't too much of a slope if you're in a wheelchair or on a walker or something. But I just was curious if people have thought about other strategies here. Just thought I'd ask.
If I might, Nat.
Go ahead, Zona.
Zona Butler again. I think that's a great comment, but at the same time, Nat, I think I can't speak for the whole school committee, but I do think education, we represent education, so education is important. And I think having someone come, and I think us being able to ask all those questions that are and presenting those scenarios to this expert can help us, really put a foundation under our decision, and if we can get on board with this or not. I don't know. That's a great picture. That's one of the better pictures I've seen of is it a rotary or is it a roundabout?
That's a roundabout.
Okay. Of the roundabout. But it's slow motion. The traffic, the kids, and we just built, some subdivisions, added more kids to that equation, more bikes. It is, to see the traffic in the morning, it's scary. It really is scary. And hopefully, if we were to put it in, it would slow the traffic down and that sort of thing. But in my mind right now, I can't see that. I just see, oh my God, what have we done? And I wish that we could put it in temporary full scale,
I'm just gonna
and
say
just
that.
see it run before we make that final
No
decision.
negativity on Facebook about the wooden roundabout though.
You know, Facebook is what it is.
Oh,
I don't like Facebook
brutal.
personally, but you know, people put way too much out there. But I think we have to take this really serious. It's a
Yeah.
decision we're making for the island and for the future and for our children. And you know, to me, again, I don't know how we would be able to put a roundabout that size in temporarily, but I'd love to see that happen before we spend all that money to do this thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Mike.
is it the best option for what you're trying
Nora,
to resolve?
Can you stay right there, Mike? Can you answer that?
Well, yeah, I think and this is not new. We've had the concern from the school about the school crossing operation, crossing guards and that kind of a thing. Not just a safety, but you know the manpower. Are we going to have to hire more crossing guards? That kind of a thing. In other states, not Massachusetts, we don't have guidance on crosswalk operations at roundabouts, but other states do, and you know that's easily shareable and it has been shared. But I just wanted to note that a lot of this would be exactly the same as it is now, the crossing operations with the crossing guard. I would just suggest that it would be in a much safer fashion. And if I could just kind of demonstrate what I think I heard from everyone here, the crossing guard would be on Bartlett Road where the hand is, where I'm hovering. So that once you get a cluster of children together, the crossing guard would stop this one car, the black car, stop that one vehicle with the sign, the stop sign, the handheld, whatever, walk them over to the refuge area, and then anyone coming out of the roundabout, again, 10 miles an hour, because that's how fast you go around roundabouts, or less, you would have a perpendicular line of sight to the crosswalk. The crossing guard would stop the children in the refuge area. The refuge area is a minimum 6 feet at its narrowest point, so it's a good sized refuge area to have a lot of people wait, and then carry the children across once this vehicle stopped. That's why we had it drawn this way. Once that vehicle stopped, because that's state law to stop at a crosswalk, would walk the children across a second time. Right now, you don't have that refuge area in the middle of the street, nor do you have the perpendicular line of sight of the vehicle who's stopped at the crosswalk. Right now, they're at an angle. If you're on Surfside Road, either approach, you got to look hard to your left or hard to your right, and quite honestly, behind you, if you're going to see children walking across the path, which currently is just straight across right through here, you got to look behind you to see if there's a bicyclist coming and running the bike path stop sign or not. And that's really a lot of risk that's involved with it, because you have the 3 other approaches that you have to worry about. That's drastically reduced by this. You're just worrying about the one vehicle who's already stopped behind the red car. And the black car will easily, the line of sight's there. You're not paying attention to anything except the car in front of you. Once you're as a pedestrian in the refuge area, the only direction you're looking is to your right. That's it. And the other car who's coming out of the roundabout, it's perpendicular to you, has full-blown straight ahead line of sight at you. You're not worrying about the car that's coming from your right or your left or another direction. You're worrying about just this one vehicle. And that's why we say that the risk is reduced, the safety is improved because line of sight and conflict points are all reduced. And the turn is slower. This guy's going 10 miles an hour, which may be a little bit slower than somebody taking a left-hand turn off the Surfside onto Bartlett Road, maybe a little bit slower than that. So that's why we're saying but we can obviously demonstrate this by sharing what the crossing operation will be and trying to let more and more people understand what that operation is going to be, because other states do this. They build roundabouts next to schools, and there is one in Northampton and other states and other towns in Massachusetts. And it happens. I think a lot of it's just, like you're saying, just understanding the problem a little bit better. Perhaps we can animate this picture and have the vehicles kind of go around real time in that speed to where it's, again, better understood, because a lot of us had to learn why these are safer, and we kind of drank the Kool-Aid, if you will, on why this is the preferred option. It's more efficient, safer, air quality benefits, and all the rest. But not everybody fully understands that. And quite honestly, a lot of us wouldn't be doing our jobs if we weren't recommending the most efficient and safest option. It's not to make it more dangerous. It's to actually improve safety for all users of this intersection, not just the cars that are using it.
Before I go to Andrew, I want to just bring up something real quick that's fresh right now happening, okay? Tom Nevers intersection. The reason that's getting changed, Donna, is because Matt is actually the one that sort of talked about it the most back when this was all getting done, is the distance to cross the old way you just veered to the right. It was very vehicle-friendly turning there, but look how far it took to get to cross that road. For a bike or a jogger, Ladarazzola jogs there every other day, I see her. Okay, so flash over to where we're talking about now, Bartlett, and how far the distance is to cross Bartlett. And one of the original concepts was to put a turning lane in, because we have the land at Poets Corner now, and that was the plan, one of the options back in 2000, whatever, 10, 11, I don't know what year, but it was a while ago. Red Sox hadn't won 2 more yet. And think about, if we put that turning lane, they would have had to put a refuge thing in. They would have had to do something, because the kids would have had to cross another like 12 more feet than they already do now. With this design, the refuge is part of the functionality of it, okay? So I think that is something to think about, the distance of what someone has to cross. I don't care if you're a 7-year-old or a 70-year-old, it's still a long way to go. And I think that some of that stuff we didn't understand back in the day. No one thought about Tom Nevers being too far. Nobody talked, as Bert brought up, the cut-through thing on the little island that they did to improve milestones where people could stop. That was never nobody ever thought of that. That's been there for 50 years and no one thought of it. So I think we're all educating ourselves a little bit, but the refuge thing and where a crossing guard can operate to get the kids over and to the other side would work probably better under a new system, but we need to educate ourselves and learn how they work.
We do. I just want to make a couple more comments. You're probably going to need 2 crossing guards at each area because of that refuge. And the reason why is by the time the crossing guard gets to the second side, you're going to have these little kids over here itching to get across, and they see the crossing guard and they see her coming. They think that it's going to be okay to cross. And if that car that's pulling in is not paying attention, it could be catastrophic. In my neighborhood, my kids and I, we developed a nickname for the kids, darters, because they dart out when you're not expecting. They just do it. And there are a lot of special kids in my neighborhood too. And they're not always with an adult. They're not always under the proper watch as we know it. And if I understand correctly, the whole reason for it is for the emissions problem.
No. That's part of it.
Just part of it?
It's just.
And does emissions mean the gases that cars give off? Is that what we're talking about? Standing, 15 cars at one time, sitting somewhere, giving off high emissions. Is that right?
Exactly. If you're in a queue and delayed in your island.
So they're still going to have to do that same stop, in possibly in 2 different places. So you could possibly have 4 or 5 cars in the rotary that can't move because of kids crossing. So I'm not sure if that's going to take care of your emissions problem. Do you know what I mean? I mean, to me,
it's only about a half an hour.
Slows it down like you say it slows it down. That, to me, does not resolve that problem. I'm just putting that out there. I don't know if people have thought about that.
The emission
Absolutely.
thing is part of the process now. I mean, you know what I mean? It's not, it's
but just think about it. If it's going that slow, so you're crossing kids, those 2 cars are stopped, but at the same time, the first batch of kids that came across earlier are just crossing over there. So the black car that's entering, the 2 other cars that are already in there, and possibly that red car are all going to be stuck waiting for that last set of kids to cross. I'm just putting that out.
Okay, Zona, we appreciate it.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, we gotta get Andrew on first, before Mary, so go ahead, John.
Quickly, just noticing 2 improvements that could be made. The refuge place to the north, that could be completely eliminated, because if you look farther up towards the school, there's already a crossing space, and that's more narrow. It exists. By eliminating that refuge place, we're taking
some up there.
Yes, and you're also there's no need for a sidewalk on that side, because there's no sidewalk all the way going down to the Mews. The crosswalk down by the Mews is already in a narrow spot, much farther away from the roundabout. So we eliminate now we're just doing a 1 crossing guard in this refuge area we'll call it the west. We could either make that area farther down to the left, it's just a little bit more walking to come around that circle and then have it crossed over in the more narrow spot. Also, you'll notice there is a fence there. I don't think you're going to have children darting across to make a shortcut, because their shortcut would have been farther up towards the Mews to go to the school and cut through. If they're going to the high school, they'd come down here. So I think by eliminating the sidewalk, getting rid of the north section, we just hit 2 more safer points, and I'll leave it at that.
Downside to that, John, is they're gonna have to cross another street to get to that second sidewalk. Even though it's not that busy, it's still another intersection they're gonna have to cross before they get to that second, to the narrower one.
On the top?
Yes.
Well, they're safe going on the sidewalk all the way towards it.
But
Because
they
right
have to
now there
cross
is
the
one.
street to get there.
And it's already existing.
No, it is, but I'm just saying.
And there is a
it's
crossing
6
guard
half
there.
dozen. Yeah, well,
And it's more narrow.
but they're gonna have to cross a street before they get to the crosswalk to cross the street. Do you understand what I'm telling you?
Which street?
There's another street between there and that
McLean is
crosswalk.
further down. I don't know that there is a street.
I think there is a.
Well, that's Larrabee.
Yeah, Larrabee Lane, I mean, how many cars?
I know, but
Once a year.
still-
And they still walk past it now.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just.
And there's a
I mean,
switchback.
They're already doing that.
It's a switchback you'd have to do to walk all the way back.
Existing, we're doing it now.
Hey, you know what? They should put those speed bumps back in.
And you know something, Zona, and before I go to Andrew and then to Mary, there's gonna be a lot of improvements in all of this area over time. I mean, eventually, the road's gonna cut through to First Way from the rink. What's that? Bacchus Lane. Eventually, it's going to happen. Hopefully, sooner than later. Cars all have to come back out and go back into Surfside Road again. It's ridiculous. It's kind of crazy. But so all these smaller improvements are going to happen, whether there's an intersection change itself, whether there was a turning lane, whether there was stop signs or not. There's going to be more improvements. There's going to be sidewalk on the other side of the road by Gail Schretz's old house, where the town owns now. So there's going to be improvements for crossing too many times for kids. So it's all going to be part of an improvement, regardless of the roundabout or not. Andrew, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to remind you that we've spoken to a resident who's done a number of funding projects across the country.
Yep.
Her name
Christine.
Christine Viennas.
We're trying to set up a conversation
Yeah.
with her. I don't know if she hasn't.
Well, she's a funding expert, but she is familiar about roundabouts. Can also be another person who, I mean, everybody at this table probably has been to another community where a roundabout exists, so there wouldn't be like unfamiliarity. But she does have expertise in funding these types of things in communities just like ours, close enough to it.
Yeah. She's pretty knowledgeable lady. Mary, go ahead.
Okay, so I want to think a little bit bigger picture here. I want to talk about pedestrians and cyclists and the bike path. Cars, for the most part, not always, will stay in the paved road. They will stay in their lane. Pedestrians, in particular, and also cyclists, are looking for the shortest distance. And this arrangement is very unfriendly to that mode of thinking. There are going to be people, and cyclists in particular here, who want to cut through. I could see somebody, if me on my bike, entering the roundabout at the crosswalk that's sort of in the curve there, from going from Surfside to Bartlett. No, not there's Mike, up. Yeah, right there. So if I'm on my bike on the bike path, I could enter there and I can go through the rotary without having to make those 2 hard right turns, without having to stop there. You just think about how people are going to look for that quicker pathway coming through here. Zona's point about the children, they're laser focused on getting where they want to go. They're not thinking about detouring over to where somebody thinks they ought to go. A fence is not an obstacle. The younger you are, the more likely you are to hop a fence. And so I look at that and I see disaster waiting to happen, as the interactions that are planned by adults are not what people are thinking about. The other thing that I see here is that we could eliminate a lot of the need to cross if the bike path were on the other side of the road. And I mean, from the school, from Prospect Sparks intersection, all the way to where the Surfside bike path does cross the road and end up on that side. It would be a major change. It would be expensive. It would take a lot more time. But I think if you look long-term, it would be an excellent way to accommodate more pedestrian and cycle use of this road without putting them in danger with crossings with cars. There are people that cross now at Vesper Lane. It's a very bad place to cross. People coming on the bike path headed into town don't have a clue where they're supposed to go. They don't know if they're supposed to continue on their bike on the sidewalk on Vesper Lane or cross there or cross in the middle of the four-way intersection. If we had the bike path on the other side of the road, we could eliminate a lot of those potential conflicts.
You're talking about the Muse side, right?
Yeah.
And how far do you think it should go?
The
To
entire
beaches,
length
right?
of, the entire length, from
the
Sparks Avenue to the beach.
To the beach?
Yeah.
We'll be dead.
Well, so what you could do, what you could do is you could just move the road, whichever way it is, south, I guess.
I know what you're saying.
To grab the bike path where it is and put the bike path where the road is on the other side. I mean, it's a big shift. But if you're talking about safety and you're talking about accommodating the uses, it has a lot to recommend it. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Well, Mary, I mean, God bless you. I don't know, maybe ACT now can fund that. So what do you got, Wendy? Go ahead.
I just quickly wanted to add another thing. What I thought you were gonna say, Mary, was that we could expand bus service and it would eliminate 7-year-olds. I mean, John and I lived off of Mizumass and we had to drive our kids because you're not gonna let your kid, go a mile, so that's one way I see it.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I
mean, I don't know what the guideline, but I think that could really help alleviate a lot of traffic and a lot of safety for little kids. Yeah. I mean, another thing, and I know Mickey and the Historic Commission would hate me, but I remember when a long time ago, there was a high school student that was hit more close to,
two, actually, one at the Boys Club.
Yeah,
one at
that
school.
1 year. It was a long time ago
Yeah.
now, thank goodness. But, at that time, there was a lot of discussion about crosswalks and lights, and I understand that that's definitely a character change, and that's where we all landed then. But it's something, maybe there's something more solar, more, Nantucket perfect, a better solution toward that. But I mean, in the hierarchy of things, as we're all trying to juggle it, there might be another way. Like, if safety's first, we really need to make sure we're looking at all the things that might be out there.
Nat, can I clarify?
Yes, go ahead, Mary.
I wasn't commenting on whether there should or shouldn't be a rotary. I was just commenting on safety for pedestrians and cyclists.
I think Mary, what you're saying, and I think I want to ask Zona and Pauline kind of the same question. Do you think what we have now, I don't want to say the word works, but I can't come up with a better word. Do you think it functions well for safety as it is right now? Do you believe that? Or do you just think that, well, this is a kind of a mess, but it works, and if we change it, it's going to be worse? Because that's what we tend to do here, and I'm just curious if you think what we have now is like acceptable.
If you're asking me, I think that there are definitely unsafe spots along Surfside Road, in particular in front of the Vesper Lane crosswalk.
But
and
it's a whole nother animal. Just getting
Right.
that pole out of there would fix that.
Right. No. It would help, but no, it wouldn't fix it. I like the four-way stop at this intersection, but I'll confess it doesn't affect me very much. It's not an intersection I go through, so it's not my fight right there. I think it's much safer with the four-way stop than it was before. I don't really know if it would be safer with a roundabout than it is with the four-way stop, except that my comments about people being detoured and taking more chances because there's more confusion, that you're forcing people out of the way. I think that aspect of it would be less safe than it is right now. I don't particularly like crossing the Surfside Road down near the beach on the bike path, but I don't think the traffic is so heavy there that that's really unsafe. I don't really know what other spots require crossing. We've already got a four-way stop at Fairgrounds and South Shore, so.
Which doesn't work.
Again, I'm not commenting about the
just saying.
traffic, I'm just saying about, safety for pedestrians and cyclists.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you all for all the input, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon, but definitely want to continue the dialogue and discussion. So, Mike, you don't need any action, so is it okay to move to the next item?
Sure, I'll just say this, the information provided on mini roundabouts here is just great. I'm going to steal a lot of this for other mini roundabout projects because there was a lot of rigor that went into putting this together, and that doesn't mean it's not good. It is very good, and it's going to be used.
Yeah, thank you. And Mickey, thank you for coming. So we're gonna go to the capital list, Mike, is that what we're doing now? Is that what we're doing?
Yes, and there is a schedule in your packet of the capital requests dated November 6th, 2019. That's on page 126. I will say that, well, you know this, Nat, because you serve on the committee. There was an updated list that was provided to us that
Did it not make it?
it did not make it into the packet. We got it right about the time the packet was getting made, but I'll project it. And just quite honestly, you can use the one that's in your packet. There's really one change. The Old South Road Fairgrounds Road improvements were moved from the FY21 year to 22 in this version of the capital improvement plan. Everything else, I believe, is the same, but that was the one.
And just please for everyone here to know, Mike, nobody knows all the little details of this. So just to go over what we did last week at Capitol for everyone.
Okay.
Newtown Road is going to be a separate plan for the bike path. Oh my God, for the improvements to the road with the speed humps and the sidewalk and the two improvements that were asked at the end there for the curbing, correct? So that's going to be one article now, unlike last year's.
There'll be separate articles. Newtown Road is oh God, I'm losing my vocabulary words. Cobbled, decobbled from the package of projects.
It's going to have its own article, not set with something else.
With that said, are the sidewalk improvements?
I got to ask him that. You're talking about going to Amelia that was on last
Well, I'm
year?
talking, about the sidewalk improvements around the roundabout that doesn't
Didn't happen,
exist, or,
right.
is that gonna be separate, or is that gonna be included in the roundabout
You're-
funding request?
You're talking about the Old South Road,
Fairgrounds, Old South Road, where you're gonna put that sidewalk by the eye doctor on the right-hand side
And
of the
then up
road?
to Amelia. Remember that was part of it, Mike?
yeah, this is all getting moved out to 22. This is on the plan that's dated
So that's what that one is.
No-
Rotary to Amelia one.
November 10th, I guess this
But is
was.
that packaged with the rotary still?
Both of them are moved out to 22.
But is it packaged with the rotary, or is it,
They're two separate.
Newtown separate now?
Newtown is separate, and then the
All right,
the
the
three
one
improvements:
is the separate one, Dave.
Amelia Drive mini roundabout, Old South Road corridor
It's the
improvement.
decoupled
okay,
one, right here.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what, I know what you're asking, and I couldn't see it.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense. It does. And that includes the ACI thing to Charlie Hughes's corner and to Amelia as part of that sidewalk improvement, like it did before.
Explain the ECI.
ACI, the guy, whatever. We're gonna go from we're gonna go from Choir Mirror to the bus stop thingy at the corner of.
That would be correct. Correct. That's the sidewalk improvement along the south side of Old South Road.
And Andrew's favorite one from Fairgrounds to Amelia sidewalk.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. That's what was in the article last year.
Correct. And I think the point of this discussion is that it's not in this year.
Correct.
Okay,
No,
yes.
no, that's right.
That's right.
He just wants to make sure it's a separate article. Which I
separate
think we all
packaging.
agree on that now. So, okay, so what other one is there? Andrew, go ahead.
So I'm just noticing there's a couple other changes I see for page 126.
Yeah,
So it looks like Surfside area reconstruction has been divided into two, and some of it's moved out to the next. It shows as 6,545,783 on page 126, and it looks roughly divided into two up there.
Correct. That was something else that should be noted, that it was a phase one and a phase two of the.
changing the name of it, as was suggested, do you know?
That's what was talked about. If that's acceptable to other groups, that'll be fine. Basically, we're calling those improvements, we had called them the Surfside Area Roadway Improvements. That included Lovers Lane, Orquah, Monahans. Now we're going with the names of the road, the Lovers Lane, Orquah, Monahans roadway and multi-use path improvements. So that one, you know what particular streets we're talking about, and two, what are the improvements? That's roadway and multi-use path, where that was a little ambiguous before.
Does anyone have any questions on this? Because this is stuff that we've gone over, and there is some stuff I want to talk about, but I don't want to keep talking unless someone else has something to say on this Surfside area stuff. Yes, Andrew?
I have another observation.
Okay. So, Mike, I'm going to talk about what we talked about last week. So, Rob McNeil has done a lot of work with the neighbors on Lovers Lane. So everyone needs to know that there's been an incredible amount of reaching out, meetings, drainage. There's people down there with jetties that we probably need permitting as a jetty. It's unbelievable. So he's got this, they've got a pretty good plan here on Lovers Lane. So you're gonna be hearing about Lovers Lane getting done first because of the detouring of the other roads. This has come up, this is probably you're gonna hear some scuttlebutt about this. So what we talked about the other day at Capitol was to do some quick temporary repairs to the humongous puddle that is getting worse at Skyline intersection. You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, everyone, I don't have to get too perfect with my points. Because the road it's almost impassable with any vehicle with a low gas scoop under the end. So even taking a left at Skyline is actually almost as bad. So we requested Rob to fix that. If we're gonna try to go to Lovers first, which does make sense engineering wise, but you can't just leave Skyline like that. And Aqua like that, just like it's a joke. You can't. It has to get fixed. It's a town road now, Mike. Is that a town road now, Andrew?
Lovers Lane?
No. Aqua.
Yes.
Even though we haven't got all the right-of-ways figured out yet,
It was taken, it's a public.
Perfect. That's all I need to know, because I brought that up at the meeting too, because I was 99% sure of it. And so I think he's agreed, if they have to fix it, because it'll be negative to the town again, okay? There's already a very unique sign by Skip Cabot, if you go by and read it, it's actually pretty good. So, Mike, so go ahead now, I just wanted everyone to understand that is being decoupled in name, but in the way it's gonna get constructed, it's gonna be kind of reversed, because of the need to have the ability to have a detour. You can't detour to Lovers Lane if Lovers is in its current condition. I mean, that would be unbelievable, like really bad decision. So that's why. How did I do, Mike?
Good.
Do I get like a B- on that explanation?
No, that's great.
Okay.
Andrew had a couple of other observations. I just want to make sure that my notes, I didn't go through every one of the small changes, but.
I'm just noticing because it's out here big in front.
Uh-huh.
$3 million for the Wellwinnet Road supplemental was moved to an out year.
Because that's federal funding, it shouldn't be included in the local capital plan.
And we may be getting some design money. Didn't you say that?
Yeah, and that was all voted last year.
We already have it.
We already have our match
Okay,
for
never
that.
mind. So I got confused. So we
That's
have
a
that.
construction- That's a construction amount, though, right?
The 3 million-ish, yes, and that's
That's supposed to pass, huh?
not a local obligation.
Does everybody understand about Walnut? Maureen, do you know about Walnut? You're new.
No,
So-
I don't, no, I don't
Okay,
know about
so-
this project.
So this is sort of like this gift from on high that somehow happened. So Mike found this amazing potential to get that bike path funded.
Well, I was
because
approached.
it-
I didn't really.
Because it connects to.
It fit into a
It's
category.
It fit a category, yep.
Fascinating project that if we could pull this off. I mean, it's pretty good. So I just hope everyone supports this process.
So
Question.
Walnut Road is a bike path, is that what you're saying?
Not the road is a bike.
No, but
right now it is
there's
the-
3 million, the 3
Right now,
million.
it is the bike
Yeah.
path.
Yeah, no, I know that, but the 3 million is a bike path.
Yes. Yes.
Has-
Federal funded.
Gotcha, okay.
Has anybody talked to the Wawinet folks lately to tell them it's coming?
I think we've already got through that before. This has been a couple of years now, hasn't it?
Yeah, there's been a little bit of outreach, but the significant outreach won't really happen until we start the design process. We have the funding for that process. It's just that process hasn't started.
Okay, but
Is
just
that my
my
hot mic?
advice is forewarned is better than delayed. Just so people won't remember that was discussed previously. They'll read it in the paper, they'll say, why didn't you talk to me? And you can say, we'll talk to you in 6 months, but just advice is free, so it'd be good to talk to some folks out there. Tony Cahill is active with the Homeowners Association, is one person maybe, but it just seems like that'd be a good thing to let people know, even if it's still pending, that that's being pursued, because we've talked about possibly doing a small area plan there in connection with the master plan, and some people, I'm just predicting for what it's worth, may say, well, wait until we decide something rather with the small area plan, but it's important to let them know ahead of time so you don't have process stuff kicking up.
I think, it's interesting that you say that, because I have a list of the 3 most dangerous roads on the island, and Walnut is one of them. And I just would think that no one would be against it.
With the deer or without the deer?
With just as a bicycle rider or a pedestrian. Walnut, Quinton, and New Lane are the 3 worst on the
The only reason I'm raising that is that's if you're a bicyclist going out there. If you're living there, you may not welcome bicyclists.
Right.
Okay, so.
Yeah. I don't know who there's only about.
Well, there's a civic league out there, so just get the civic league president.
Tony Cahill's on the Civic League board. I'm trying to help you kind of cut through the
Yeah, no,
tail.
I know the Cahills, yeah.
Robert Patterson guy used to come to our meetings.
Yeah.
There's a few, I'm trying to think of everyone that's out there. Well, Robert.
He was the
Young
one
does
at
all right.
the Civic League meeting that Nat and I attended who indicated an interest in working on the Wawinet small area plan. So it just seemed like he's the one. So if I see him, he plows that road, Squam Road. So I think people should be grateful that this is happening. It's just you don't want to have. There's just so many dynamics of people getting shook up because they didn't know. It's better to let them know sooner than later.
Mike, do you have any contacts out there, Andrew?
Well, I do. I have the same
Okay.
person, but I do, for history and for an understanding, and Jack knows this very well, the Wawinet Bike Path has been on a bike path list.
Out years,
Since
I know.
1990, I believe.
77, actually. But no.
I mean, it took us forever to get to the Comic Con, but the planning board over the years has gathered up easements through its process as well. So I understand, I fully support what you're saying.
It's not that it's not a great project or that people shouldn't know it, but there's a lot of elderly people there. There's also new people coming in who may never have heard of any of it.
I just do want, there does need to be an understanding that
it's happening.
These are multi-year, generational legacy projects that were begun years ago. They take a lot of time. I think the board, when we did Pulpus Bike Path, the planning board had been gathering up easements for a year. Finally, it was stitched together. So
It's all in the message, right?
Yeah, and I do, have to give credit for, again, planners of your thinking ahead, stitching this together, and that's what we're now,
And
finally some funding.
when you
and
talk
other
about
things
that,
coming
all I can
together.
think of is Quidnet Road, because it's not even a road.
Well, Quidnet's probably on the
Yeah.
77 list as well.
Not,
So-
It's not a
real
road.
It's not,
Not a town road, you mean?
it's got
It-
width issues and it's like
Undoubtedly.
a kind of a,
Taking
A-
issue.
Yeah.
Another thought I'd have on the bike path would be to go to the trustees of reservations, to Diane Lang, and say what a great thing this is, and people will be.
No. The good news is, this is funded through the Federal Land Access
No,
Program.
but-
And no, just to let me finish my point. That group that actually was part of the Federal Land Access Program, it's Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, they were actually worked in coordination with the trustees of the reservation, who came to us and say, would the town support building a project or a path to go
All I'm
out to that
saying-
area? So there's already been a lot of outreach and coordination at the federal level with these groups.
If people turn over, I'm just giving you advice about good neighbors, letting them know so they
Yep.
can celebrate, they can share the happy news, and et cetera, et cetera. So
Sure.
it's not adversarial in any way, and I appreciate that they were
No,
involved.
it's
So-
good to recognize there has been some outreach,
Yeah.
minimum, absolutely
I'm still
minimum,
shocked.
but some outreach already initiated.
it's like the half
It's
a walk
exciting.
away.
funny that happened.
Well, that's a long road too, so.
Mike, I
yes,
just have a
Maureen.
quick question about the two Matticat bridges. Are those placeholding numbers? Because it seems, Massasoit Bridge and Millie's Bridge aren't exactly.
Yeah, and those are actually getting moved out. That should have been something that I noted as well, and I failed to do that. DPW has requested they moved from 21 to 22 because they're still under design, and that design is not progressed significantly enough to where we can ask for funds this year. So that both of those are being moved
And what
out.
did Rob say about the latest accident on Massasoit? Because I can't remember what he said the other day. I'm sure
Well,
that you
oh
were
yeah,
thinking
no,
about that.
well, they
The
did.
latest?
we
There's been
finally
another?
Is
did-
something gonna get fixed there?
Well, we did get it
Temporary?
fixed.
Oh, it is
The-
already.
the-
Been out there.
The torn out, somehow
Okay.
live right there, so
Okay.
the torn out things have been fixed, but we still have a bridge that is a daily safety issue in the summer. You get, talk about 7-year-olds who stand on that bridge to crabs.
The strength of it's good though. It's just
Well, no, the strength isn't sufficient to support all the construction trucks that go across. We have, that's another,
Okay.
that's a big issue.
I know that heavy, but nothing above 26,000 is supposed to go down Barrett, whatever the other road is. Barrett Farm.
Yeah, so the Matticat Conservation Association is very concerned about how that bridge gets designed and done, and then obviously Millie's Bridge as well, since that's the only access to Smith Point. And so now moving it back out, we've been talking to Rob about this, and
Okay,
so
so you
I'll
know-
follow up with him.
Okay. Mike, what else is there that's not here that it's supposed to be? Or as I forgot, I only know a couple.
No, though, I think we've highlighted the two. The bridges got moved out, the Old South Road improvements have been moved out, and there's always going to be cost adjustments on some of these. The counting stations went from 75,000 to 116,000 to represent the actual costs
And that
of those
counting
stations.
station thing, does everybody know what's going on with that? I think that's a very interesting project. Can you just explain that? to
Oh, sure.
everyone?
Just so,
It's-
I mean, we collect vehicle counts now based on just taping rubber
Yeah.
tubes down on the road. You might have driven over them. Sometimes that gives us the number, class, and speed of vehicles. What this system will do is actually go 24/7, 365, and give us the same information. Instead of having, say, 3 days worth of counts in the summertime, we'll have 365 days worth of counts all year round.
Stations are salt air friendly, supposedly. We already asked that question the other day. And can have new technology put on them. In other words, so we get these things in, doesn't mean that they just like fall apart and have to be replaced. They can have new technology installed into the same structure or the same,
How can you have 365 when you have someone you say we have snow that has to be plowed?
No, these are These don't go across the road.
Well, they're
these
over-
This is a
electric
whole new
guys?
thing, Bert.
It's an overhead.
This is like
Not the old air hose
completely
across the
different.
street.
Yeah, no, that's not, that's to eliminate all that stuff.
HTC has stamped approval on those boxes?
It's in the public
That
way.
question, I think, the other day. I remember, right? So that's good stuff. I like that because we need, I mean, data is always good. And, you know, whether you like the data or not, it's good to have the data. And it might be able to help us with future, you know, safety issues. There was a few other things brought up that I thought was worthwhile. I don't like Big Brother, but sometimes some of it is okay.
Yeah.
Crashes, different accident issues. It could, you know, it's actually not a bad thing, I think, so. I pressed the wrong button, I've lost the whole thing, yeah. Go ahead.
One more question, just, which ones are gonna be subject to a vote for 2.5 override? Has that been established yet, or?
Oh,
I think it was discussed at the capital program committee meeting, but I think that's a decision that goes to the finance department and finance committee, I believe. None of them, that wasn't discussed.
I'm just wondering, because you got 19 million in capital and 7.8 last year, just.
Yeah. It was brought up and just not answered or recommended.
yeah, I don't remember that either, so. So anything else, Mike, on that, before we move on to the next thing?
That's it.
Okay.
If it's okay, we'll just include updated charts and stuff and tables
It's
for
gonna be-
future meetings.
Our next meeting is, when is it, December what? Are we having a meeting in December?
Yes.
Yeah, Eleanor, do you know? Sorry to. Because we might be able to have some updated information on this stuff by then, because we'll be done with capital within a month and 5 weeks, so.
December 16th.
Okay. All right, so Mike, do you want to move to the Pleasant Street, Williams Lane improvement?
Sure, if it's all right, I'll just go through items 4, 5, and 6 generally and say that the select board did approve agreements for all 5 of these projects earlier this month. And we've already initiated initial discussions with the designers, the consultants we're using for these projects. And quite honestly, more information will be provided next meeting and in subsequent meetings. And then once survey is completed on all 5 of these projects, we can actually have public outreach sessions to discuss the conceptual improvements. There's more information in the report, the transportation report on page 14, but just quickly, the Beta Group is the designer for the Pleasant, Williams, and Sparks Avenue Complete Streets improvements. The Sparks Avenue Complete Streets improvements will use about $100,000 of state funding to implement that, and that's being coordinated with sewer improvements along the corridor. The VHB is the designer of record for Orange Street Complete Street improvements, and that means that they're basically sidewalk and bike lane improvements along Orange Street. That's what the Complete Streets improvements
When you
means.
say Orange Street, you're talking about Marine Lumber onward, right?
From Spruce Street, correct,
Yeah.
essentially,
You say
yeah.
Orange Street, you know, it's like 2 different Orange Streets.
From where it
in my
comes
mind.
out from Goose Pond
Yeah.
Exactly.
down to the rotary.
Exactly.
Or
So
is that a rotary?
It is for the moment.
Yeah.
For other
Very
people use
nice.
other descriptors of it, but
I love that.
and then for the Tom Nevers Road multi-use path feasibility study, that's not preliminary planning. That's again just more conceptual feasibility. What needs to be better understood along Tom Nevers is utility impacts and endangered plant impacts, and there's a little bit more preliminary planning that needs to go into that to understand what that project's impacts are going to be. And Weston Sampson's doing that, and the reason we selected them was that they're already working on
Utility
the.
stuff.
Well, no, they're actually doing the Tom Nevers Park
Oh, yeah. Oh,
plan.
that's the reason.
So we're using the same consultant, so we can maybe find some efficiencies in public outreach sessions for the parks and the bike path. But
Can I just interrupt you for a minute?
Go ahead.
Andrew, for anyone that's new, we have the right of way on the east side of Tom Evans Road already from years ago, correct?
We have sections of the right-of-way, again, the planning board set
I
aside.
remember this conversation
Through
from
various
whenever.
approvals. They produced a great initial review. There's a few areas with some tricky topography, and
I know there is,
there is
down the end on the
danger.
left. Yeah.
A lot of that area is in
High,
habitat,
yeah.
so that will have to be looked at.
So,
this is an exciting project also to move forward. It's been talked about for a number of years, and I think with the planning that they did at for the park at the end has really motivated us to move forward.
okay.
It is a wide right of way. Of course, the one thing is that the poles are all in
The wrong place, I know.
The right where the bike path needs to go.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hardest thing to do is move a pole.
How
Okay.
about burying them?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We are going to ask for that, for right up.
Plenty of room to bury them. I mean, it's not like they have to go around anything.
But in all the subdivisions, on
They
the
make
east,
you bury them.
they're already buried there.
Yeah.
so-
Yeah. So, Mike, on the Pleasant Street, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Is this including the land from the family that we're supposedly getting an easement from? The land with the white house, what's the name of those people? I forgot. You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. I always call it the
I can't
farmhouse,
think
but
of the
that's
name of the people that own that. That's,
between Williams Lane and
Yeah.
Gardner Prairie Lane.
Is this part of the scope of work that we're bringing these people in for?
And alternatives analysis of how to fit some kind of bike and pedestrian facility in that corridor, because it's extremely narrow. There is not a wide public way there at all. So there's going to be
Again.
looking at all the different options, and then obviously at the end of it all, we'll pick a preferred alternative, and that's what we'll use to.
And again, an old plan from the Mid-Island is my personal addition is if the roundabout ever goes in at Prospect, this could be one way out of town, that stretch of road, and we fix this forever. Because it doesn't need to be two-way and until if that is ever done, then it doesn't need to be anymore. And now you got on-street, safe walking, everything is accomplished on that section of Pleasant Street, if we could do that.
Correct.
So, anyway, does anyone else have any questions on this before we move to the Orange Street? Or did we talk, no, we already talked about Orange
Yeah,
Street.
I think we get the Stone Alley.
So now we gotta go to something else. Stone Alley, very exciting, with Mary, you're here, so good. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
I need the commission's approval to sign this contract. It's over $5,000.
Yep.
We have existing funding to get this prepared, so I would ask you to vote to authorize that.
Yeah, and I would, if anyone has any questions, this has been on the right-of-way committee's agenda for about, I would say 6 months now, I'd say roughly. A lot of attendance, different people that live in this little special part of the island, and this is exciting, so.
Move approval.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, Eleanor. Thank you, Andrew, for all this effort to this. Is this yours, Andrew, the next thing?
Well,
Or is it
it's-
Leslie's and yours, or
it's
is it?
ours.
Ours. Well, you know what I mean.
The time is
Not
upon us
1970.
here. Today was the deadline for citizen articles.
Yeah.
But if the commission has any articles that we want to sponsor, we probably have to have that wrapped up by our next meeting in December. So, one of the articles that we have talked about consistently is an update to the poles and wire bylaw, which is something we're working on. Don't know if this group, the planning board, of course, has a number of articles.
You gotta keep it separate.
Dealing with zoning and other things, but I don't know if there were any other ideas that this commission wanted to move forward.
The open space thing, board or commission?
It's
Board,
board.
okay. Just checking.
And we had
Yes, we're
talked
glad
at
to.
one point about bike issues, but it
Oh.
sounded like that wasn't needed here.
What's going on with that? You're talking about, Ian's
Ian's.
thing? Yeah. What's up with that with the?
I can
Okay.
tell you that there's 3 separate citizen articles that were filed related to that issue from last year. Separation from passing, right
The
of
lower
way.
side?
There's 3 different ones
Yeah.
that were on the preliminary list that I saw. So that will be up for discussion at some point. The commission wants to support or not.
Okay.
But again, we'll be reviewing those probably in December.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts, Andrew? I mean, it's, the commission doesn't usually get on an article like on the actual warrant occasionally, but not that often. So it's sort of a spirit endorsement most of the time. So is there anything, Mike, that you have? I mean, sometimes it's good for us to support select board articles. So I think that we should leave that door open, because anything that's under the select board, it would be really good to have commission support in certain things. So I don't know what is gonna be under the select board right now, Matt.
I'm not
but,
sure yet either.
Yeah,
How many articles were submitted?
I only had a preliminary list, so I don't know what came in today. I had a list of about 10 that had been submitted and certified prior to.
Okay,
I have a feeling there were much
today,
more.
many more, right.
yeah.
There were a lot of people tempered today.
Okay. Okay, Stone Alley, town meeting, bylaw subcommittee, Andrew? You wanna just?
So this is
Yeah.
just an update. The
Yeah.
bylaw subcommittee has met once. We need to reconvene at some point. Probably will be in January after we get through some of the more pressing issues right now. But just to outline some of the initial discussion that we had, if anyone has any questions.
I think that was a good meeting, Judith.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, it's
uh,
sort of resurrected, kinda, you know?
We had, John was there, Fritz, you and I, Dave, you weren't, or were you there? I can't remember. But we were cleaning up a lot of old stuff, for example, count of number of meetings you could miss that you can now call in that affected that and how you would deal with absences. I can't think of other examples right now, but we tried to be pretty systematic and go through things. Another item had to do with, could you vote for yourself if you wanted to be reappointed and how that would be handled, and thought that that was the way we've been proceeding, so.
Yeah, Andrew dug
we
up
should-
some old stuff, and some of it's right in our packet right now. That it was really a housekeeping meeting to sort of clean up a few things that don't even exist anymore, really.
So it's kind of like this is if anybody has thoughts that they haven't surfaced, it's time to do that. So when we meet again, we can finalize it, bring it back. And is there a time frame when, like, we'd have to act in the spring before April to take effect, or before June, or?
We want to have this done for our annual meeting, which is the June meeting. Typically, there's a report issued by the bylaw committee to that board, but I would anticipate we could have it addressed prior to that. Just not in the next several weeks.
Okay. The ocean advisory, Andrew, who's that designee now?
Me.
Oh, yeah, that's what I thought.
I've been on this for a long time.
Yeah, this is since '08, this has been.
Yep, and if you remember, again, we originally left off the ocean plan for the state. We kind of.
Well, they forgot. That's when they forgot that we were a regional thing.
I forgot we were in the ocean.
We talk about being the faraway island.
Right.
Yeah.
A little too far away.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Right, exactly.
legislative delegates worked hard to get us a seat on this group. I've been on it, through the first plan, the second one. I'm happy to continue. I talked to the staff to see if anybody had real interest on being on it, and there wasn't. I mean, I'm certainly willing to continue unless one of you would like to step forward.
I just looking at the top of page 218. Says, to meet our diversity goals, we are requesting at least one of the nominees as a female or a minority.
I think the group is. I think there are other regions where the group is. I think very diverse.
Oh, I thought that meant our nominee.
I saw that there too, but we got one nominee, so.
Oh, that's, okay. Interesting.
Strange.
I was just wondering, Andrew, now we have a coastal resiliency coordinator, which is a creature we didn't have before, and so I'm just wondering, what is, since this is essentially worries about coastal zone management issues, so I kind of wondering, should there be a connection of some kind? I'm just throwing that question out.
Well, I think the difference here is this is really blue water. I mean, this is not coastal shoreline. This is basically the state's ocean water. We have Lauren Sinatra in our office, who's the energy coordinator, and then Holly is really serving the role through the as a preservation planner. She has that real connection. I mean, Chris is on you're on the committee, right?
Mary's the chair.
Okay, great. So I think again, this is focused offshore, and I'm trying to remember the boundaries are.
Oh yeah, how many miles that? No, I was just that's fine, because I was just looking at that and wondering if we needed to make sure we had coordination there, but it seems it's fine. Okay.
Okay, so do we need to, I see the beautiful letter here from Lisa. Do we need to reappoint you, Andrew, or does it just happen by itself?
I make a motion to reappoint him.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
David, I was, sorry, all unanimous.
Is it 1 or 2 year appointment?
It is
18 years.
Yeah, perfect. All in favor, say aye.
Okay, we'll see.
Till death,
I don't know, Eleanor, or whatever their term is.
it's till death do you part.
All right. So, Andrew, you want to go through? We can kind of take sort of have a back and forth, whatever anyone wants to comment on. Just sort of raise your hand a little bit with Andrew's goals he's put down here.
Do we need to vote on the Stone Alley?
We did.
Okay.
Yeah, you did, Brett.
Oh.
You forgot. See that? To death do you part. Great. So we'll start out with the master plan process. Andrew, do you want to just?
Yeah,
sort of a generalization.
I did this was something that you all had asked for a periodic update. We were going to do this in September, but didn't have a meeting. So there is just basically some narrative about where we are with all this. The master planning update process, as you know, that's scheduled for April of 2022, but we're moving ahead with the items that we can get going with now. So transportation plan is basically finalized. The open space plan, we do have a consultant now to work with to finalize that particular plan, which is consistent with that item of the master plan, which there are 9. We've had productive meetings with the Civic League presidents, and we are also looking at other some examples of community plans and having discussions at the local level. So that's about it for master plan as of now.
I think just want to speak quickly before Judith raises her hand, because I know she wants to talk about this. We had a really good meeting with the Civic League, Judith and I, and I think that I was part of a few of the area plans when it was all new and nobody really, heard of it before. I mean, theoretically 10 years ago. And I think that it's sort of interesting talking about the Mulwine bike path. There's a lot of other issues. I mean, they should be thrilled about that, but there's other things out there, zoning, water, the weird lot sizes, and there's some stuff out there that is a little prickly to figure out. It's not like Quidnet, it's pretty much easy. Nantucket was easy for the most part. The Cisco thing we did with the height, this out in Wallwannet is different. And I think that some of the ideas that came out of our meeting was sort of the next step in the master plan, like Shimo. What was the guy's name that talked about that? I can't think of his name.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
The guy with the black hair.
Right.
I've never seen him in my life. He seemed really good. He had all kinds of energy. He's sort of the replacement for the two guys in Surfside that did all the work before, and Chris McGee, right? So having a down version instead of the 9 elements, there might be only 5 for, say, Shimo, or they're certainly not going to have a Surfside snack bar at Shimo. You know what I mean? They don't have the same stuff. And I think it's a fine tuning that we've never been able to do, and never really thought about or needed to. Now they have sewer. There's a lot of things in these smaller areas that could come out of this and have like a mini plan or something to that effect. And Wallwannet is definitely, I think, is important, because I don't think half the people out there know what their own zoning is. Do they understand that water issue out there? I mean, you know what I'm saying? So, so that was what I got out of it, is a next step to working with some of these people. The Civic League has a lot of resources, Andrew, to contact these people that we don't even know who they are, that want to help us. So
And
I think that would be good.
To add on to what you said, Nat, if I'm in order, they were clear that people who worked on these efforts 10 years ago, many of them are older, may have moved, whatever.
Yeah.
So your example of the fellow from
Chris
Shimo,
McGee, you got, what's his name?
Alan Reinhardt has been very involved,
Alan's-
other people, but that part of what is beneficial both to them and to us is they'd like to use their involvement as a way to get the next generation of local leaders engaged, both with their residential associations and with the town, and that some of them would be happy to work more broadly on town issues, but we told them that we're going to try to schedule a meeting with their co-presidents, with the 3 of us sometime in the next few weeks. I volunteered to try to write up specs about what Nat just said in terms of how this works. They've got people who volunteered to be outreach connectors to the several of the individual residents associations. So, and I think the thrust would be to have more focused work with the residents associations during the heart of the summer when people are around. So we really need a kind of rollout plan. I would say, in addition to Wallwannet, for those of you not on the planning board, we had people from Tom Nevers come in at the meeting last week wanting to talk about whether some ideas about providing more options for covenant lots out there would be a good idea or not, and we left it that we may talk about that in connection with small area plan review. There may be other topics. I met today with the, thanks to Leslie, the Worcester Polytech students, and they didn't know there was a Nantucket small area plan, so I sent that to them to give them more to connect to, so I think there's a lot to be done there, but as you probably are going to say here in a minute, for each of these small areas, somebody from this commission is supposed to be kind of tapped, right, to work with them.
This is where we get into, we had, yes, supposedly there needs to be someone involved in it from the board of the commission level, staff person, Ed Fawcett and Tom Quigley are the two people, I couldn't think of their names right off of my head, and that are not involved now, but were like providing their own houses. I mean, it was unbelievable. These guys were like really involved, and Surfside. But that's part of what Andrew's going to have to work on as far as if we're going to hire, like we had Rima working on this before. Who's going to be the staff person that's going to work on it? There's going to have to be, a new, sort of process that we have to develop. I don't think we've got that far yet. I mean, my involvement was more about, I wasn't doing any of the work. I was just, like I do now, talk a lot, know everybody, know what's going on, sort of, that was my role. But Linda did a lot of work, and Barry did a lot of work in Tom Nevis. It was just, I wasn't involved with the Tom Nevis plan. So there has to be somebody that's clerically person that can deal with some of this stuff with the staff, because that's what ends up happening. Because the citizens don't, they're providing a sort of a different input than the paperwork side of it. You know what I mean, Judith? So that's...
Well, and we already see that we met with the Civic League and they'd like to jump on it and have it get started already. And we're like,
it's hard to...
trying to be sure we have our ducks in a row to know before the word goes out, who's the mothership, where do you connect back, and what are the documents and materials. But they have a very effective distribution system, the Nantucket newsletter, but they share that with and the Civic League newsletter is really very effective. So they wrote just this week to offer further thoughts, and we're going to talk, what's today's Monday? On Wednesday, a little bit more about this, and also talk with the manager and with the chair and vice chair of the select board in early December, just to try to be sure we've got a baseline, and certainly that will come back to everybody here, but that's definitely going to be something that's going to take a lot of energy in the coming years.
Another thing to add to Judith's point, what we've already done, and Leslie's been really good at figuring these things out and coming up with sort of the permitting, the zoning changes, the trends that have happened post a lot of the things that we've done. We got special permits for pools in Nantucket. We have the VR, which people forget about VR. VR is a big change from R20. It really is. It's not just nothing. We've changed the zoning to the DeLacy property, which kind of goes under the radar. So I guess what I'm saying is, 10 years ago, we didn't have any numbers to talk about. We hadn't really done a lot of changes yet. So now we have these in, and there's sort of some modification. You can look back and say, okay, we did this. Like, Tom knows I always laugh about the airplane noise, because that was like the number one thing, and now no one even knows anything about airplane noise anymore, except the jets. So, but there's new stuff to talk about. We never talked about what's going on at the Navy base now, then. You see what I mean? So there's a lot of good stuff to kind of go over. But I think, Andrew, I think that the existing plans, it's going to be a whole different sort of approach than some of these smaller places that want their voices heard. It's like a fresh new thing for them, but for the other places, it's more about, okay, what's the existing conditions today? What have we done that's different? What are your new concerns? That kind of thing. So.
And also just, to point out that we do have expense increase requests, as part of the build-out analysis, which would be used, that's in your packet. As well as, we do hopefully need to fill our senior planner position, which we have not been successful in attracting candidates to.
Qualified candidates. Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Question through you for Andrew, if I may. Andrew, just in the transition of the yard sale program to the real estate specialist, Ken Bogrant, it's one of their goals. I'm just curious about any of the properties that exist. Are we talking just about the paper roads, or are there properties that might be sufficient enough to support a covenant or a something that applied towards a shy list? And I'll follow it up with another question. If so, if it does come available, would we be able to impose a restriction that if it is to be put out to bid, that it would be protected in a covenant or something towards the shy list? I'm trying to think over the past years, besides just the standardized paper roads, there have been parcels that have been available. And instead of just giving them, selling them, putting them on the tax roll, if they're sufficient enough for us to develop, to use towards our shy list, or if we can't use it toward our shy, at least put it into a restriction for a covenant.
Yeah, I don't think, John, that the town is selling any buildable lots just to put them on the tax roll anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think there's really any of those properties left. And really, in this particular goal, the real estate specialist is sort of taking the lead on these, and we're assisting.
Yeah.
So with his new position, Eleanor and I both provide a lot of backup support for him to do his job. And what I'm doing here is really making sure he understands the actions of the past and where to find the information. So I don't, unless you have a very specific, I don't know.
No, I think it's great just to clean up the paper roads. Just something like that to add some, just to have this road that goes nowhere, where we could actually incorporate into somebody's adjacent lot and add a little land to that, and also add some to the tax roll, and at a minimal $5,000 or whatever, just puts it into the town's bank. Just that alone is a pretty fair job, just to try and straighten all that out. I was just looking beyond, was if there's ever a lot or two or something like that that comes available, that we look at that.
Yeah, no, and I think that the town has identified pretty much all of its existing land resources and what is available. I can think of a few examples where land was transferred to the affordable housing or housing Nantucket for them to build on, like at Surfside Road, property in Tom Never. So, where there's some hope to build on, those parcels have been transferred. I will tell you that the town does not have a sizable inventory of buildable properties. If you look at a printout, you can see, looks like, oh, there's all these properties. Most of them are on Esther's Island. So we're not really encouraging much growth out there, especially with the one bridge and other things. But I will say that this particular goal here is, Ken is doing really a great job, and we're transferring a lot of that responsibility over to him wherever possible.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
So you skipped over the census. Just to let you know, that's a big effort. We've had 5 meetings. We've had really great participation by state and federal officials who have really made special trips out here to meet with us. We are interviewing candidates for a temporary job funded by Remain, which will help with the outreach and a lot of the activities. We have some great people that have applied. Oh, we haven't done yet, have we?
No, that's been submitted.
Right, one of our members, Margaretta Andrews, really wrote a fantastic grant, Census Equity Fund, to the state. We've identified, and the state has identified, really there's 2 specific populations that we need to work on. The immigrant population, which is really a statewide effort, to make sure people aren't afraid to fill it out, that will use some of the resources that are phone and online and different languages. And also what we found is that census forms will not go to people that just have P.O. boxes. So We need you all to make sure to get the word out on that. We're going to do a special mailing to those owners to let them know that they will not get a census form at a PO box. Goes to a physical address.
We used to in the past.
Yeah, but wait a minute. A
Not
mailing
the
physical
not the
or
not the
physical
10-year
like in the
census,
door?
the yearly
like
census.
Like from a,
I think he means to the door.
can't be a
The
mailbox.
federal
Okay.
census rate will only be mailed to.
That's how a lot
Physical
of Native
addresses.
Americans in some of the upper
But
Midwest.
most of us in Nantucket
lost-
have P.O. boxes.
I know.
Well-
This is
Have
why
a
you are,
physical address in your.
Yeah, but that's,
A lot of people here.
that's why you're
moving
aware.
a counter came by my house already. Somebody with a little bag.
Can't get
It was
mail
the
out
weirdest
of
thing.
Yeah, there,
But
If you got a box.
I have a box,
yeah,
but
if you
I,
have a physical address, it'll come to
a
the
lot of
physical
people don't
address,
because they
but
get
just
knocked
the
They're
off.
moved around all the time.
Away.
Well, or they're moving house a lot, so.
yeah,
But there's,
interesting.
the good news is, again, we're gonna try to raise awareness for box holders and make sure that they know that there are new ways, easy ways to get online, make sure they're getting it.
What about the street list? No bearing on this?
No, and the thing is, you know, with the census, I think we talked about this, I mean,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have to, it is all, once you get the material and you're done, you have to destroy it, and there's, you know, they're very specific, you cannot share information between agencies and other things, so it's, but that's good as well, because,
That's why the number comes out so low.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's pretty obvious.
well, I know, but I
I
don't
think this is new, though.
there's clearly concern of sharing information
Yeah.
for
Well, I
other
understand.
agendas,
Yeah,
which is
of course.
really
No, I understand
not
that.
going to happen.
That's why I'm gonna, even if it's used for, you know, other things, I think the data platform thing was good. Just for us, or everyone here that lives here, knows that it's, you know, I'm glad that they did it because I knew it wasn't over 20, but everybody said it was, and I'm glad that, but this will probably come back at, you know, 14 or something, which is fine too. You know what I mean? I have a different feeling about the census than I used to because we have more accurate numbers versus the federal government way of doing things, so.
So I'm just curious, if someone has a PO box and, you know, knows, where do they go to get a form?
So we're going to, when the forms actually come out, so they're not gonna come out until Census Day is April 1st. So the forms will start to be released in March. We'll have those uploaded. When we do the mailing, we'll have, you know, links for you to go and look. And again, you can do the form online and by phone. That's a new thing this year.
And would you have them at the post office for people? You know, I'm just curious, I mean, it's just like, if you're going to
That's
the
a good
post
point.
office,
It's a good
maybe have a
idea.
pile of them there.
I think they said no, that
Yeah.
you can't just,
There's a lot of restrictions on what you can and cannot do.
Oh, yeah. Something that
And in
would make
fact,
sense like
there's
that,
going
you
to
probably
be a
can do
training.
it.
Andrew, there's gonna be a training, this is a good time maybe to tell people, and we'll bring it up again, if you don't mind. The state census, oversight is the Secretary of Commonwealth. They will have a training for, local people who are gonna be doing outreach or wanna get involved with outreach in any capacity. We were going to do it last week, but there weren't enough people signed up. So we postponed it to January, and I'll of course let all of you know when that will be, if it is something that interests you. But these people are gonna come down, they've done trainings all over in other communities, and they have sufficient participation, so I'm hoping we can get good participation, because it's a big effort, it's gonna be very, informative training.
And when is it over? It starts in April, when does it end?
August. So the person that we're going to hire would, you know, have work until that point.
Is there a more efficient way to reach people where have a census fair, hosted at the high school, and have everyone come to you instead of everyone knock on the door and try and catch them while they're home, and then when they're not home, come back?
Or do it an hour before town meeting.
There's 400 people.
We're going
Have
to
a cocktail
schedule,
party, that's
Eleanor actually participated in one of the elder affairs. We've got connections at the school. We're doing some different events when the parent teachers are involved. So we're going to try a number of different things, but, you know, are there more efficient ways? Absolutely. But this, again, this is a federal process. The committees can only encourage, and, ultimately people can make a decision not to participate. It does end up, there is an estimate like $2,000 per year per person for each of the 10 years. So it helps with our school, mainly with many of the school programs, so lunch subsidies, elder programs, and of course our representation. So we really want to get people out.
And our transportation funding.
And transportation funding.
$16 billion federal funding.
That's why Catherine was so all over this stuff. She was really into it.
Are the forms or the cards or whatever it is in multilingual? I mean, are they in different language?
Yeah, it's
There's like 12 languages, or 23, I forget the law.
23.
Yeah.
It should be this one, the one you have to know.
The flyers on this US Census.
Maybe
site
none.
Where's your answer?
The next item, just for you all, our holiday party is December 11th. You can save the date. Commissioners are always welcome at that. Last year, we kind of sent it out late, so this year, you have your advance notice.
Where are we?
It's going to be at Island Kitchen at the second floor.
Okay.
Also, under this item, I know that we've discussed zoning enforcement, and I want to make sure you know that we're doing a lot of new initiatives in that area. The MCD review, right, is, so basically the zoning coordinator is going through all our old MCDs, looking for compliance, and making sure that we're still up to date on those. Our zoning commissioner has initiated a number of actions, which again were rare before he got here, on different problem properties, which is a committee that Leslie oversees. It's clear with this, and you all need to understand that zoning enforcement is a time, it takes a lot of time and a lot of coordination, and a lot of it starts here locally and ends its way up at town council. So we have several items that are now moving forward for where there is no compliance, and we're moving forward with those. So I think we're still sending out the list, right? Or the reports.
We haven't had one for a while.
We'll get one out to you. We had a little backlog on some building permit related information, which just got straightened out.
Can I add something, Andrew? If you don't mind, because this comes, I didn't bring my glasses again, and I didn't see this. So, Leslie, were you working on the number of permits separating? I don't know, I don't want to ask you to do more than you're doing, but I think you were already kind of working on this. Just so everyone's, I know this is more of a planning board thing, but it just got brought up a little bit, so I figured I'd bring it up. Separating new build from rebuild, like we used to talk about infill, and now that word sort of went away. I don't know why, but I like to kind of restart it again because it's sort of true. Most of the building here is not a fresh piece of dirt. It's never had anything but deer and rabbits, you know what I'm saying? And we don't really, it's good to see that, especially with all the discussion about building and too much of everything, and I think it's important to understand that, where we're headed. Is it slower now than it was a year or two ago? I know that you can't do that right now. I'm just saying I think that should be a goal of just like every quarter. I don't know when it should be. So what's your thought?
So we collect all the data about the types of permits.
Yeah.
We have changed the way we compile it from a couple of years ago, so the comparisons aren't the same, but I can certainly get some information out to you.
I just think it would be good information to have, because we can't have too much information, but we can have too much information that's not important. This is important, Because people think if there's 222 permits, that's 222 houses, and it's not necessarily true. So that's why I'm saying it, and I'm also working with Brian Turbot on some other stuff to try to get him to sort of separate his explanation of the word growth. I had a kind of a discussion with him and with Steve the other day about that. That word growth is like the wrong word sometimes for some of this stuff. And because the town, the public needs to understand where this is all coming from. Why is our tax rate the way it is? Why do we have over $10 million of free cash this year? People need to know this stuff. It's important, and it doesn't get explained, and all we hear is negativity. So I think it would be good for you guys to sort of at least provide some pieces to this to help that discussion.
And I think Megan posted some building permit data on the website at the end of last week, on the link.
Okay.
In the know.
Yeah.
On the planning
Is that what we
page.
call it, in the know?
In the know tab.
Okay, have to find that. All right, thank you. Anyone else? Ian, did you want to just go through? Does anyone else have any questions on anything?
I mean, if anyone has any other questions, I mean, under other activities, you know, at least under administration, we've had a number of new activities there. Where Holly Bacchus has been promoted, Kathy Flynn promoted to work on HDC related matters. We have a new hire, Esmeralda Ramirez, who came from the Steamship Authority, which maybe is not good for all of us, but certainly good for us.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed when she told me she was leaving down
I know,
there.
she was fantastic there, so
well,
our senior planner position remains vacant. We had a promising phone interview, but that person withdrew. Jeff Marash, our local inspector, has been promoted. That was the former local inspector position. We have per diem building inspector interviews scheduled, and then Tucker's position is going to be transferred. He's going to become a housing specialist reporting to town admin after the first of the year. So.
Is his office going to be downtown?
Yes.
One more car? I just
gonna ride his
thought I'd
bicycle.
throw that in.
I'm a fan of
that's
the
the right
e-bike for a
bike.
commuting option.
Andrew, can we talk about, I like this next one. This kind of fits what I was just talking to Leslie about without even seeing it. So the I-1 review, I know that this is a planning board sort of thing, but again, if we're here and talking about this stuff, I think that that's just a really important discussion as far as the spillover out of the ROH, the complaining about work vehicles not parking, especially in the Delaney Cliff sort of area where like since Russell Post got blown up, I mean, there's been a lot of work up there. And that's where this all started. So I figured I think that's a good conversation to have, Andrew, that you've been working on behind sort of as a sort of a secondary zoning change stuff after the big stuff got done.
Yeah. So the R1 review is part of the planning board's discussion, at least initial discussion about sponsoring some sort of pool-related article. The R1 district is scheduled to be phased out, and there are a number of different replacements. As you mentioned, it's on the edge of the ROH.
Yeah.
And there are sections of it that are appropriate to move over to ROH. We've actually been doing that for a number of years. I think that came up in the discussion with the HTC that they wanted the ROH district and their district to be coterminous. There are other larger zoned areas that might be more appropriate for R10, R20. And then R5 is the equivalent 5,000 square feet, and we have an R5 limited zone. Regular R5 allows duplexes, tertiary. R5 limited does not allow those, and has a lower ground cover.
And would second dwellings be a special permit like we have it, isn't that? Or no? On the R5 limited.
I don't think so.
Okay, unnecessary.
I think it just removes duplexes.
Okay,
But we've done a pretty, we've done a pretty detailed analysis of these lot sizes.
yeah, that's what I wanted to say. What Leslie did with the R1 lot size analysis was eye-opening. I didn't realize there were so many bigger lots in R1, and that's where I think the pool discussion sort of can help sort of craft what, instead of changing it to something that's unconforming, it would be, it's definitely a good discussion there for that, those big lots. Does anyone else have any questions? Fritz, this is your bailiwick. You got any questions on this?
No.
Okay.
No.
Where else, Andrew? Oh, is this the, what is the next thing? Is that about the permitting digital thing, or is this something else?
No, this was part of the Novak study, which was part of the presentation made before the select board. And I thought you would just get, you know, on page 222, which some of the townwide recommendations are discussed there, which would of course have impact to our office. And then planning and land use services begins on page 224. You can see that we have completed a number of those recommendations.
Is that what the check
Have
marks
made
are?
progress on quite a few others.
Okay.
All in all, I guess it's just, there's a lot going on, which I think we're all sensitive to. This is the busiest time, as there's some deadline-driven issues right now, especially with the census. We made several important deadlines with that and getting Nathan, our GIS guy, and I worked on an ad where about 50 addresses were left off, which we corrected, and that was driven by a deadline for submittal. The same with what is the new construction projections, which again, what you're trying to do is project which houses now are under construction will be occupiable by April 1st. So both of those were made. And you know, again, as we work together, put the warrant together between now and January, it's a particularly busy time.
Just real quick, I want to just go backwards one for a second. The sewer master plan, Andrew, David brought a lot of information this year to Capitol. It was very interesting what they're working on. It's actually something that is a good discussion to have as far as all of this growth, anxiety, and it sort of reminded me of what you guys did with RC2 and 3M and just jiggling and stuff. It's pretty amazing how that's all worked out. He's got, I think we should, I'm going to talk to him. I have to talk to him about something else. And I want to ask him about this, if it's something he should come to one of our meetings at some point. I'm not sure if it should be planning board or here to explain it, because that was the first time I'd seen it at Capitol. And it's like extensively what he's got mapped out over the next few years. It's fascinating. The truck that goes in the pipe to find out where the holes are. I mean, it's pretty crazy. And there's a lot of cool stuff that's gonna happen that I didn't even know they were doing. And I kind of know what's going on, and I didn't know any of this. So it's pretty good stuff. Affecting South Shore Road, Manny Dias's pump station, existing, it's fixing. It's not because there's more people, it's because we voted to add sewer, we voted for the needs areas, and he's planning it, and he's doing a really good job, but it's complicated. So I just wanted to throw that out there to staff, if they think that that's something that we should have on, like we had Mark Willett last year. That's why I was thinking along those lines, so.
I think that would be good. I would get out the I believe there's an initial report that's out soon. That's a group that I've been on that group since it started, and consultants have been excellent. David's focus on this matter, I think, is great.
Yep.
I think the town sort of creating this position outside of the DPW, so their specific focus, has been very positive.
Yeah, it has, and I think it's also working with the, as a result of listening to Mark at Capitol as well, finding all this stuff out at Capitol before it gets to here, it's amazing. There's a lot of effort to do things at the same time now, which there wasn't before. It's definitely working, and you know, when they're working together, if there's something they gotta dig up, they're talking about what else do we have to fix. I know it doesn't seem that way
No,
with
no, no,
National
no.
Grid,
Yeah,
but
well-
it is happening with them, which is, I think is great for us, because that's been a problem for
I
decades.
think don't they wish that National Grid would partake with them?
Well, I mean,
yeah.
I'm just saying, as far as other things,
Yeah.
they're doing it, and there's discussion about tearing up Prospect again, and that was where the problem sort of ended, where they weren't working together, and they're definitely doing it. So, found out something about Washington Street Extension a month ago that was shocking, that they're working on together. So, anyway, so I thought I'd bring that up, Andrew. Mike, which one of you wants to talk about Amelia Drive or any of that stuff? I mean, that's all kind of pretty good stuff too, I think. Right? I mean, do we want to talk about that? I mean, we don't really need to. I mean, I think everybody knows.
I don't think there's too much to report on that, other than we've already accepted a preferred option, and that's being
Preferred
recommended
option, everybody knows about
through
that.
Capitol.
The connector pieces, the easements. Okay.
And the town is closed on 7 Amelia Drive.
Right, that was the other one I forgot all about. Does everyone know that?
What's that
Town
gonna be,
bought
a parking
7
lot?
million.
It's that lot between the dispensary and,
I think that was a
Keepers?
smart move, because
Between,
getting those easements
not the
to
dispensary,
connect
between,
now might be able to not be necessary.
well, the Cinco and.
yeah,
That's the
Keepers
lot
and.
next to the bank?
I mean, that-
Parking lot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The parking lot
To
next
connect through,
to Keepers?
to
Yeah.
connect, yeah.
Yeah, Keepers.
You're gonna run on a road through there into the back of town?
It would, yes, it's gonna serve as a connection back into the parking lot as well as some affordable housing.
It's a great idea. We talked about it with the pot place, and now this came up, and it sort of fixed that, you know, so. Does anyone else have anything?
Your
We
meeting
have to-
schedule, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, that's meeting schedule,
Move-
sorry.
Move to approve the meeting schedule.
Yeah,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
I have
Thank
one
you.
quick thing before you.
Yes, Wendy?
Sorry, just want to report out, Andrew has a copy of the rural policy plan, the rural policy advisory thing that I serve on, as a member of this. This was an interesting process. I attended tons of meetings, and it was extremely, written by like the group, and I want to give a huge public shout out to Linda Dunleavy, who came and spoke with us.
That's
She
the lady from
really-
Franklin County?
Yes, from
Yeah.
Franklin County.
That was really good.
Whatever. With the help of Helena, I can't say her name wrong, Z-I-M-C-A-V-G. She's Senior Comprehensive Planner from the Southeastern Regional Planning Economic Development District in Taunton. And the two of them really coalesced and created this thing together. And it's very much the point made we're trying to raise at the state level is to look at new policies with an eye to how it affects rural communities, which we are one of. A lot of it made me feel good about how good Nantucket is. You know, a lot of the problems they have in Western Mass are really.
That conversation
Yeah.
was unbelievable.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So,
David, you
How do
weren't
we
here
get
then, but it
copies
was-
of this?
I just checked the website. There's still not a link live.
Oh,
I don't know
okay.
why.
We'll
but-
send it out, we'll
Yeah.
run it off and send it to you, I just got it.
I think there's. I know
No, that
they've been
would be
waiting
great.
for it to go live to send it. You know.
Or do
Send it out.
people want paper copies, or would you?
I think electronic.
Can you get electronic?
Yeah,
it's
electronics
easier and cheaper.
Andrew, I think that would be great for us
Sure.
to see that, because.
I haven't read the whole thing yet, so
And I'll just also mention that I serve on the Economic Development Council for the Governor's Office, and as a delegate or a person from the Retailers Association of Massachusetts, which I'm on, so it was really interesting to be on both of those at the same time. And that, by contrast, was completely driven by, the staff. And so the rural policy has no staff, and one of our main recommendations was, can we get a staff member in the State House, to look at rural, because there's nobody.
Good idea, right.
So baseline. But the economic development, and that one is completely all about housing, and it's gonna be like very much about like how the state has fallen behind in production of housing, and that's why you see all this crowding. Interestingly, though, on the rural, they're like, we got all these empty houses in Western Mass and all this problem, and so I'm sitting there saying, these two hands, there's a lot that could really, work together to solve, get better broadband out here, get maybe a train, whatever it is. Like, we've got some answers right within, this really beautiful state that I got to go to Western Mass a couple times.
And Wendy, thank you for doing this,
Yeah,
because,
for sure.
there's not many people that could do this.
Well, I think this
traveling
whole
around like that,
Commonwealth
so.
owes both Linda and Helen a really big thanks, because they built that train, and I just want everyone to.
Now, you all done, or you gonna still have to meet?
No, it still meets, it doesn't have as much of a deliverable.
Not a quick goal anymore.
Yeah, I mean, updating that, certainly getting feedback from it, because we just put it out to the policymakers, all the delegates, et cetera. And we may look at how in the legislative cycle, what bills might tie to this, so that would be kind of more on us as individuals to sort of advocate for the parts that touch our own, areas, so. But I'd love for everyone to give a look, it's got a lot to it. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Wendy, so much for your efforts.
Motion?
Yeah, I know you're dying to go. Moving Together 2019, do we need to talk about that, Mike, or is that a Mike thing? That's a Mike thing, right? I don't wanna just move to adjourn without.
No, not just on my thing. Eleanor attended the conference together. It's a statewide conference for bike pedestrian issues. A number of different sessions dealt with a lot of things that are going on here in Nantucket, so we can share experiences with other communities. One deals with some of the bike warrant articles that are going into citizen articles, like crosswalk design and those kinds of things. I think it was a educational conference. I learned, like I said, experiences from other communities, and it's very helpful. I'm not sure what Eleanor's takeaway was. I think she enjoyed the conference and learned a little bit more, coming from a zoning perspective, looking at transportation issues, specifically bike pedestrian issues. So I think that was just again, not to belabor the explanation, just to say that it was very worthwhile, and maybe next year's conference, someone from this group would want to go as well. Just to, again, share how informational it could be.
Okay, Derek, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
I'm so sorry.
Derek was at Moving Together as well.
Are you cooking breakfast now? I'm so sorry. I might have some eggs when I go home, actually. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. Emily, thank you for coming. Mary, thank you for coming.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.